2 years after we got married, I still felt like we were just starting our journey together. It had been 2 years since we promised to be together forever, but my heart sank when my wife happily announced, "I'm going to have a baby." The father was my boss. I remembered her saying, "Let's wait to have kids. I want us to enjoy being newlyweds." When we first got married, my name's Ryan Kitchen, and I turned 30 this year. I married Susan 2 years ago after meeting her at work. Even though we worked in different parts of the company, I couldn't help but admire her beauty whenever we passed each other in the office or shared an elevator ride. When a coworker finally introduced us, my heart soared with joy. I'd always looked for chances to chat with Susan, and I wasn't going to miss this one. I watched all the movies and read the books she suggested. Slowly but surely, my efforts to get closer to her were paying off. At that time, it seemed Susan had a boyfriend, but I didn't pry too much into it. I was showing her that it didn't matter to me. Looking back, I'm amazed at how persistent I was. Susan decided to leave her job and become a stay-at-home wife, and I'm glad she's taking care of our home. She's taking cooking and flower arrangement classes, having relaxed lunches with friends, and enjoying a comfortable life. 2 years into our marriage, just when our parents started hinting about wanting grandchildren, something unbelievable happened. The busy overtime season was over, and I was feeling great, leaving work on time. Thinking that Susan might be feeling lonely because of my busy schedule, I decided to surprise her with her favorite cake on my way home for the upcoming long weekend. I thought we could go on a mini vacation together. I grabbed brochures of nearby tourist spots from a travel agency near the train station. To save her the trouble of cooking, I ordered takeout. "I'm back. I managed to leave work early today," I told Susan as I took off my shoes at the front door. She hurried over from the hallway, looking surprised at my early return. While explaining about the takeout dinner, I handed her the cake she loves. However, something seemed wrong with Susan. "Susan, is everything all right?" I asked, handing her my suit jacket and noticing her small nod. Her expression was serious as we sat down in the living room. Susan took a seat across from me, and then she dropped a bombshell. "I'm pregnant, and I think we should end our marriage." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Susan and I hadn't had any children yet. She was the one who had initially wanted to wait before starting a family right after our wedding. I had agreed to wait, wanting to respect her wishes to enjoy our early married life. We had been careful for the past 2 years, so how could she be pregnant now? "I want a divorce for the sake of the child," she said, a phrase I never expected to hear from her in such circumstances. I had always imagined using those words joyfully together. Susan's expression was blank, but her decision to divorce seemed final. "Please sign these papers." "I want a divorce for our child," Susan said, laying out divorce papers already signed by her. Susan's parents had already signed the witness section of the divorce papers. She had talked to them beforehand. "I want to find out who the father is, but I can't lose my composure here. I have my dignity too," she explained. "So you're sure about this?" I asked, and Susan nodded firmly in response. After that, I struggled to keep the pen steady as I signed the papers. Susan neatly folded the divorce papers, indicating she had already packed her belongings. With a large suitcase in hand, she made her way to the door, leaving me speechless. I couldn't find the right words for Susan as she prepared to leave. She didn't look back at me. Her feelings for me were gone, evident from her expression. She disappeared into the fading light, dragging her suitcase behind her. All I could do was watch her leave. That night, I drank alone until I passed out. Waking up in the living room, I realized I had caught a cold. It wasn't just a hangover. I was plagued by headaches and chills. I called my workplace and said I needed a sick day to recover. Reflecting on last night, I wondered if it had all been a dream. But there sat the liquor bottle and the pen on the living room table, reminding me it wasn't a dream. Susan had really betrayed me and left. Reality hit me hard, and my chest ached with pain. It's true what they say, the harder they fall. I couldn't believe how much I now despised Susan, the woman I had once loved so deeply. Determined to find the other man, I spent the day searching through Susan's belongings. Despite my anger, I couldn't help but notice the ring and bracelet I had given her during our dating days still in the jewelry case. And then I found our wedding ring in the trash. What was she thinking when she threw it away? Just thinking about it made me feel sick. Despite spending the whole day looking for clues about the other man, I'd only succeeded in worsening my fever. Despite my efforts to keep busy, my health didn't fully recover in just one day. In the end, I ended up taking a week off from work to sort things out. When I finally returned, I was taken aback to find that my coworkers already knew about my divorce, even though I hadn't shared the news with them. "How are you holding up, Ryan? Seems like you're quite sensitive, getting sick over a divorce," remarked my direct boss, Tom Gary, with a smirk. Gary had always been a thorn in my side, constantly making things difficult for me with his pretentious attitude and questionable behavior. As I reluctantly tolerated his presence, it dawned on me that he had mentioned the divorce. Then it hit me. Before Susan and I got married, she and Gary used to work together in the same department. "Didn't Susan inform you about the divorce? Or were you too busy nursing your fragile ego?" He taunted, and suddenly everything clicked into place. "Are you the father of Susan's baby?" I asked through gritted teeth. Gary, with an air of superiority, confirmed it. "That's correct," he replied, clearly enjoying my discomfort. In that moment, I didn't fully comprehend the gravity of my actions. When I regained consciousness, Gary lay sprawled across the room, surrounded by a toppled chair and scattered desk items. My fist throbbed with a dull pain, a testament to the altercation. The scene resembled a chaotic festival, with some people assisting Gary while others attempted to restrain me. Despite being struck, Gary found amusement in the situation, laughing at the trouble I had unwittingly invited. He had manipulated me into losing control. Gary happened to be the grandson of the company's founder, making matters worse. By punching him, I had assaulted a future executive. Predictably, I was suspended and ultimately terminated from my job. Now, I was not only unemployed but also abandoned by my wife. My life spiraled into disarray. Though I knew I needed to find work to survive, my actions lagged behind my thoughts. Daytime became an excuse to drink, and nightfall brought more of the same. It was a self-destructive cycle, devoid of motivation. The only solace was my savings, a result of past diligence. After about a month, an unexpected visitor appeared. Initially, I pretended not to be home, ignoring the doorbell. However, it persisted, ringing again after 30 minutes, prompting another round of feigned absence. An hour later, the doorbell chimed once more, aggravating my already frayed nerves. Irritated, I grumbled about the intrusion as I begrudgingly answered the door. Standing before me was a stranger, a woman of unfamiliar stature, her gaze piercing into me with a judgmental intensity. I felt a wave of discomfort wash over me, prompting me to shift my gaze away. "May I ask who you are?" I inquired tentatively. The woman, exuding an air of dignity and strength, wasted no time in getting to the point. "Are you the former spouse of that woman?" Her directness nearly caught me off guard, causing my heart to skip a beat. It was clear she was referring to Susan, and she didn't mince words. She introduced herself as Lillian Gary, confirming my suspicions about her relationship with Gary. The prying eyes of the neighborhood ladies passing by only added to my unease. I had always found their penchant for gossip unsettling. "Please come inside," I offered hastily, hoping to avoid further speculation. Lillian accepted the invitation graciously and stepped into the disarray of my home without hesitation. I hadn't made any effort to tidy up, but she didn't seem deterred. As we entered the cluttered living room, she silently began to gather the scattered debris. "I can handle that myself," I protested weakly, but she dismissed my objections. "We can't have a meaningful conversation amidst this chaos, can we? If you're not going to assist, please take a seat," she snapped, so I straightened up and settled onto the couch, watching in silence as she efficiently tidied up the room. "Why don't you freshen up?" she suggested. Her words caught me off guard, prompting me to hurry to the bathroom. I quickly washed my face, startled by the unfamiliar face staring back at me in the mirror. I shaved, washed, and combed my hair. feeling a semblance of normalcy return. For the first time in a while, I felt a bit more human. Returning to the living room, I found the cleaning already completed, with the trash bagged and placed in the hallway. "I used your kitchen," Lillian mentioned as she handed me a cup of tea. She seemed surprisingly capable for Gary's wife. "Thank you. I feel like myself again," I expressed, surprised by the sincerity of my gratitude. Lillian responded with a faint smile, though it quickly faded. "My husband asked for a divorce because he fathered a child," she stated bluntly, clearly not one to mince words. "I went through the same thing with my wife. I'm already divorced," I responded, indicating that it was no longer my concern. She let out a deep sigh, suggesting that Gary's indiscretions were nothing new to her. Apparently, he had previously settled a scandal involving Susan with money, leading her to immediately marry me as a sign of ending things with Gary. This time, Gary attempted to resolve matters with money again, but Susan refused to budge. From Lillian's tone, it was evident she still harbored feelings for Gary and desired to rid herself of Susan. "So, you want to reconcile with Gary instead of getting a divorce," I summarized, surprised that she could still have feelings for someone who had cheated on her twice with the same woman and had a child with her. Lillian appeared taken aback when I asked if she didn't want a divorce, as if the thought hadn't crossed her mind. "Do you believe it's possible to move forward from this?" I questioned, finding her expressions and demeanor intriguing. I awaited Lillian's response with anticipation. With a slight smile, she simply remarked, "We're still married after all." I'm not sure why, but her words left me feeling defeated. In the end, I asked Lillian to leave, agreeing to revisit the discussion another time. The day following Lily's visit, Gary paid me a visit. It appeared he had been informed by Lillian about her conversation with me the previous day. As a former superior, I ushered him into the living room. Gary glanced around the room and chuckled. "What's amusing?" I inquired. "Lillian's handiwork, isn't it?" Gary replied, a hint of amusement in his voice. I hadn't noticed, but it seemed Lillian's touch was evident in the tidiness of the room. The camaraderie between them grated on my nerves. When I questioned his reason for visiting, Gary disclosed that he had a favor to ask. He wanted me to persuade Lillian to divorce him. His request left me stunned. According to Gary, Lillian is unable to conceive, and he desires an heir. Susan's pregnancy presented a perfect opportunity for him. He offered me a bribe to persuade Lillian to agree to a divorce, placing a thick envelope on the table. The sight of him trying to resolve everything with money sickened me. "I want children, something Lillian can't provide," he stated, pushing my patience to its limit. I grabbed him by the collar, but he continued laughing, seemingly confident he wouldn't be struck again. Just as I prepared to swing my fist, a soft hand intercepted my raised arm. "Is my husband worth hitting?" Lillian's voice cut through the tension as she entered the room. "You left the front door wide open." "That's careless," she scolded me, causing me to release my grip on Gary. "Okay," I muttered, feeling the momentum drain from my confrontation. "So you desire a child?" Lillian murmured, her gaze fixed on Gary, who nodded in agreement. From her back, she produced divorce papers. "Are you satisfied now?" she asked, offering the papers to Gary with a stunningly beautiful yet unsettling smile. As Gary accepted the papers, his fingers brushed lightly against her hand, leaving me with a sense of intrusion. I quickly averted my gaze, feeling as though I had witnessed something private. "Thank you," Gary muttered before swiftly exiting. "We're enemies now, aren't we, Gary?" Lillian waved without turning back, indicating that he had accepted her declaration of war. Once Gary disappeared from view, Lillian turned her attention back to me. "Shall we nurse our wounds together?" "But first, let's seek our revenge," she proposed. We both decided to separately demand compensation from Gary and Susan. Knowing their wealth, we anticipated they would comply with our demands regardless of the amount. I instructed my lawyer to handle all proceedings simultaneously, driven by my desire to see them suffer, even if just a little. This retaliation would be child's play, a small taste of payback. After making our demands, Susan finally appeared, tears streaming down her face. It seemed Gary would pay his share, but he refused to cover Susan's portion. While this was expected given their unmarried status, there seemed to be more to the situation. During a meeting involving the four of us, Gary attempted to shift blame onto me for Susan's infidelity, citing my busy work schedule as the cause of her loneliness. "You're quite the master of deception, aren't you? But your tricks won't work on me," I retorted. Lillian then produced a report from Gary's private investigation, commissioned by his parents. It revealed that Susan and Gary had been involved prior to my marriage to her, and Susan had accepted a settlement to end their relationship. However, their affair had continued clandestinely. Apparently, my marriage to Susan had been Gary's idea as a cover-up. My dedication to work and my somewhat insensitive nature made me an ideal husband for their purposes. Additionally, working alongside Gary provided them with a convenient means of monitoring me. The level of detail in the report compiled by Gary's parents, at significant expense, was astonishing. Lillian calmly read through the contents, causing Gary and Susan's faces to pale. Susan was the first to crack, her hysterical screams filling the room until they were cut short by tears. "Stop it now. It's not good for the baby if you stress yourself out." We reprimanded her, prompting Susan to flinch. Under the weight of Lillian's icy gaze, Susan fainted on the spot. Gary, in a panic, rushed to her side, cradling her in his arms. Lillian's smile hinted at her surrender. "That's a pity. I believe Lillian truly loves Gary. Love and hate are two sides of the same coin. The deeper the love, the deeper the hate," she mused. It seemed Gary understood this too. In the end, I played no part in the discussion, as Lillian dominated the conversation. As the meeting concluded, Lillian laughed at me, saying, "That's it." Afterwards, news of my divorce spread throughout the workplace, as I had disclosed it to my colleagues. Despite the company's attempts to keep it under wraps, it was too late. Gary found himself sidelined at work and estranged from his family. Susan, now remarried, struggled with issues involving her in-laws. Gary's parents, who favored Lillian, treated Susan poorly, having driven Lillian away. Once all the alimony and other matters were settled, I invited Lillian for coffee. She shared her current situation, working at a friend's company while living independently. "I can't have children, so I need to be self-sufficient," she explained. Seeing her speak with such sincerity eased my fears. "I don't agree with your reason for independence," I admitted, surprising both of us with my firmness. I noticed she still wore her wedding ring, a reminder of Gary. Summoning my courage, I expressed my feelings, asking her to wait until I found a job. "I hope to become your partner," I confessed. Lillian seemed taken aback at first, but then chuckled, acknowledging her complexity. "I know I can be difficult," she admitted. "I'm well aware," I replied, gently tracing the back of her hand with my finger. It seemed she was letting go of her past as she removed her ring. Then she lightly touched my hand, her affectionate gesture filling me with warmth. "I'll make you happy, so please wait," Lillian explained, her laughter brimming with joy. In that moment, I vowed to protect her smile forever. As the video concluded, I reflected on our journey together, eager for the future. What did you think? Subscribing to the channel will encourage us to produce more. See you in the next video. I find myself entangled in a rather perplexing situation as I consider approaching your father regarding a troubling incident related to a potential mugging of my own father. Indeed, suspicions have arisen concerning your father's involvement in this alleged mugging. Currently, he is situated at home. Would you be open to allowing me a brief audience with him for an inquiry? The police officer displayed a momentary sense of bewilderment in response to my request, his expression betraying a subtle confusion. Despite this, he eventually agreed, stating, "Please, let me see him." Consequently, I led the police officer into the confines of my home, unlocking the door to reveal my father's presence. Upon beholding my father, the police officer was visibly taken aback by the unexpected revelation. This incident transpired a few months ago, and as I reflect upon it, I feel compelled to share a bit more about myself. My name is David, and I am currently a fourth-year university student. Despite my aspirations to work for a prominent company, there lingers an unresolved dilemma within me. The decision revolves around whether or not to inherit my father's company. You see, my father holds the esteemed position of president at a modest factory. During my formative years, I harbored a desire to follow in my father's footsteps, aspiring to become a president like him. However, as I entered my rebellious phase, I distanced myself from this ambition, feeling a sense of embarrassment towards my father perpetually adorned in work clothes stained with oil. This sentiment persisted through my teenage years, and to some extent, endures even now. As I matured into adulthood and engaged in part-time employment, my perspective on my father began to shift. I developed a newfound respect for his tireless work ethic, which sustained not only our family but also supported numerous employees and their families. Yet despite this growing admiration, an underlying sentiment lingered. A perception that the conventional salaryman, donned in a suit and toiling diligently, possessed a certain allure absent in my father's occupation. The narrative takes an intriguing turn when, during a shopping excursion with my father, we were unexpectedly hailed from behind. Turning together, my father and I encountered Richard, a contemporary of my father's from high school. Dressed in a suit and on an external sales trip, Richard hailed from a prestigious corporation. In the course of our conversation, Richard casually inquired if my father had indeed assumed control of the family business. This revelation prompted Richard to express disdain for what he referred to as the dirty little factory managed by my father, emphasizing the incredulity that a high school graduate could rise to the position of president. Stunned by Richard's derogatory remarks, I found myself grappling with the realization that the factory in question was initiated by my grandfather, making my father the second-generation custodian of this familial legacy. I had long been aware that he had assumed control after graduating from high school. However, the revelation of a classmate mocking him caught me off guard. Richard maintained a silent smile while addressing my father. "So, did you manage to expand your father's factory? You did mention during high school that you intended to take over the company and make it bigger." To this, my father admitted, "Unfortunately, I lacked the business acumen, and that dream didn't materialize. It seemed inevitable that I excelled in practical skills but lagged behind in intellectual pursuits. Nonetheless, I felt relieved that our family didn't face financial ruin." Richard chuckled heartily, playfully slapping my father on the shoulder. "Well, David, we'll catch up at the next reunion. I've got more work to do," he added before leaving. My father looked slightly uncomfortable, prompting me to redirect the conversation. Suggesting a change of topic, my father proposed that we continue shopping. At that moment, I couldn't shake the feeling that my father's work had been belittled without any response from me. The internal debate about whether to take over my father's company or pursue a career at a prestigious corporation leaned decisively toward the latter. A few weeks later, fate intervened as my father's alumni association event took place at the bar where I worked part-time. Despite the bustling atmosphere, I managed to serve at the table hosting my father's gathering. Fulfilling my duties silently, I approached the room where the alumni association was held. My father warmly greeted me, introducing me as his son to those present. Though similar in appearance, I maintained a serious demeanor, responding awkwardly to the teasing of my father's inebriated classmates. Richard, seated nearby, noticed our interaction and remarked, "We met recently too, David, right? Are you planning to take over your father's small factory?" This question added another layer to my ongoing contemplation of my professional path. When I truthfully admitted to still contemplating my decision, an unpleasant alcoholic breath emanated from Richard, leaving me repulsed. Boisterously, he exclaimed, "Stop it. Your father's company is nothing extraordinary. David should consider working for a company like mine instead of inheriting such a lackluster business." Despite his inebriated state, Richard proceeded to boast about his professional achievements, narrating a career history that began as a mere assistant but now claimed the head of accounting position. A sense of unease crept over me as I sensed discrepancies in his narrative. I sensed that something was amiss, but I chose to keep my concerns to myself, wary of potential complications that might arise from challenging him. My father, on the other hand, seemed unfazed by Richard's inebriation, and, in fact, found the situation amusing. With a lighter mood due to his own inebriation, he asked Richard about changes in his department since their last encounter a few weeks ago. Questioning the sudden shift from sales to accounting, my father caught Richard off guard. Eventually, Richard admitted to an abrupt transfer, asserting that sales wasn't his forte. However, my father pointed out the incongruity in Richard's story, revealing that the company Richard proudly spoke of had actually been absorbed by a foreign corporation, with its accounting department relocated overseas. Laughter erupted among the party attendees as Richard, now embarrassed and regretful, attempted to save face but ultimately decided to leave the gathering with heavy footsteps. Witnessing my father's ability to address the uncomfortable truth that others had noticed but hesitated to mention, I found a sense of pride in his candor, even in his intoxicated state. As half a year passed since that incident, my internal dilemma regarding whether or not to take over my father's company only intensified. The confusion deepened with each passing day, leaving me uncertain about the path I should pursue. One day, while relaxing at home, the intercom interrupted my contemplation. In the absence of my mother, I answered the door to find a visitor in uniformed clothes identifying themselves as a police officer. Surprised and apprehensive, I responded with a stiff voice, wondering if I had inadvertently committed some transgression. The police officer then brought up a purse-snatching incident, expressing a need to inquire about the matter with my father. The mention of such an incident left me puzzled, and I began to wonder about the unfolding events that seemed to add further layers of complexity to my already tumultuous life. Indeed, the enigmatic cloud of suspicion had descended upon my father, casting a shadow over our tranquil abode. The air thick with uncertainty, I found myself face to face with a stern-faced police officer bearing the weight of an accusation that seemed inconceivable. Inquiring about my father's whereabouts, the officer, with an air of professionalism, sought confirmation of his presence within our home. The exchange took an unexpected turn as the officer, grappling with the perplexity in my tone, requested to lay eyes upon my father. Navigating the corridors of my dwelling, I ushered the law enforcement representative into the sacred space of our familial sanctuary, a room adorned with a Buddhist altar and a photograph capturing the essence of my late father's spirit. In the ensuing revelation, I divulged the heartbreaking truth to the officer that my father had met an untimely demise in a tragic traffic accident. The officer, displaying empathy amid the unfolding tragedy, extended condolences for the loss. Yet my quest for justice and clarity persisted, and I sought to discern the source of this bewildering accusation that had stained my father's reputation. However, the officer, bound by the constraints of confidentiality, refrained from divulging the identity of the accuser. Apologies flowed from the lips of the officer as he departed, leaving me grappling with an unsettling sense of confusion and the nagging question of who had leveled such a grave accusation against my departed father. Days unfolded like the pages of a mystery novel, each chapter bringing a new layer of complexity to the narrative as I took on the responsibilities left in the void by my father's absence. Immersed in the daily operations of my father's factory, I witnessed my mother's valiant attempts to fill the void left by his absence. However, the weight of age limited her contributions. Amidst the mechanical symphony of the factory floor, the harmony was shattered by the sudden intrusion of Richard, a character bearing an air of accusation and vengeance. His booming voice reverberated through the cacophony, demanding restitution for a perceived transgression committed by my father. Caught in the crossfire of accusations, I attempted to reason with Richard, asserting my father's innocence in the face of the alleged purse-snatching incident. The atmosphere within the factory shifted, with the ceaseless hum of machinery giving way to hushed whispers and curious glances exchanged among the employees. Richard, however, remained resolute in his pursuit of justice, convinced of my father's guilt. His insistence echoed through the industrial expanse, causing a disturbance that transcended the confines of the factory. Frustration surged within me as I defended my father's honor, challenging Richard's assertions and questioning the veracity of his claims. As the confrontation unfolded, Richard revealed the purported timeline of the incident, fixing it 2 weeks prior. A murmur rippled through the gathered employees, their confusion palpable. My persistent queries regarding the accuracy of the timeline only fueled Richard's frustration, intensifying his vocal protestations. In the midst of the tumult, Richard's disparaging remarks about my father's workplace and colleagues added fuel to the emotional fire. Yet the gravest affront was his attempt to pin the blame for the alleged purse snatching squarely on my deceased father's shoulders. My chest tightened with a mix of anger and sorrow as Richard persisted in his accusations, seemingly oblivious to the irrefutable truth, illuminating the fact that my father, the subject of this tumultuous ordeal, had met his end in a tragic traffic accident a month prior. The realization hung heavy in the air, a poignant reminder of the fragility of life and the injustice faced even in death. Richard appeared as though he had ingested an entire pigeonhole, and with an amused expression he muttered, "Ha!" Undeterred, I pressed on, questioning the incredulous accusation he had just hurled in my father's direction. How could my father snatch purses when he passed away just 1 month ago? Perhaps there wasn't any purse snatching at all, I asserted. However, my skepticism wasn't merely based on the recent events. It was rooted in the knowledge I had gained during our class reunion. It came to light that Richard, since his school days, had been a habitual liar. This revelation occurred during the reunion, where I discovered that his dishonesty had deep roots. Moreover, it turned out that Richard had harbored a long-standing jealousy toward my father, dating back to their school days. This envy sprouted from a romantic rivalry. The girl Richard liked had chosen my father over him. This petty jealousy had fueled an unnecessary rivalry, leaving me unable to forgive Richard for attempting to tarnish my deceased father's reputation with baseless accusations. As Richard persistently asserted his unfounded claims, an interjection from another direction pierced the air. Someone emphatically shouted, "Your president wouldn't do something like that." Our president is a serious person who walks around with honesty, teaching technology, and encouraging independence. He always considers the well-being of the staff and business partners, prioritizing that over profits. The voices praising my father began to multiply, and I felt a mix of emotions, including shame for once thinking my father's work was embarrassing. Amidst the rising tide of support for my father, Richard, trembling and tearful, found himself on the receiving end of an unexpected defense of my father's character by the factory workers. It was a poignant moment that revealed my father's true standing among his peers. In the aftermath, I dealt the decisive blow to Richard by pledging to consult with the police over his false accusations against my father. Overwhelmed and unable to counter the mounting evidence, Richard raised his voice and fled the factory. True to my word, I reported Richard's false accusations to the police, supported by a recording of his statements made by a thoughtful staff member during the heated confrontation. The presence of irrefutable evidence expedited the legal process, leading to Richard's swift apprehension. His attempt to frame my father backfired, transforming his lie into a crime for which he paid a penance in jail. The relief I felt was palpable, knowing that Richard had received the comeuppance he deserved. Days later, Richard's supposed wife sought redemption and arrived at our house with a gift box, apologizing to me and my mother. She confirmed that Richard's actions were a result of the wounds he suffered at the reunion. As it turned out, Richard, once an elite employee, had been fired from his company, struggling to secure new employment. His lies about being an elite crumbled under scrutiny, especially when his inebriated confessions exposed the inconsistencies, ultimately leading to his own embarrassment and downfall. As he grappled with mounting resentment towards my father, an insidious plan began to take root in Richard's mind, a sinister plot to frame him. The sheer audacity of Richard's intention left me utterly disgusted, particularly when I learned of his preposterous rationale for resorting to lies and deceit. Interestingly, it appeared that Richard's wife shared my sentiments. She confided in me, expressing her profound disappointment in Richard's actions and revealing her intention to initiate divorce proceedings. The revelation further underscored the gravity of Richard's transgressions. Adding to the complexity of the situation was the fact that Richard, seemingly devoid of any familial ties, had no children waiting for him upon potential release from jail. This realization cast a somber light on his future prospects. Upon my graduation from college, I found myself at a pivotal juncture. The recent passing of my father weighed heavily on my mind, and I harbored concerns about the state of the company he left behind. Motivated by a dual sense of responsibility and an unshakable desire to honor the legacy of those who had supported my father during Richard's malicious lies, I made the decision to step into the role of leading the company. The decision was multifaceted. Firstly, I felt a genuine concern for the effective management of the company in the wake of my father's demise. Secondly, the impassioned voices of the staff members who had steadfastly defended my father resonated within me. Their loyalty and dedication fueled my determination to become a president who would be both loved and respected by the staff. This incident became a transformative moment for me. Armed with a degree in business administration, I recognized my ability to manage the aspects of the company that my father struggled with. However, I also acknowledged my need to learn from the dedicated staff members who possessed valuable insights into the technological facets of the business. The staff members, driven by a collective sense of loyalty and compassion, willingly imparted their knowledge to me, often emphasizing that their efforts were for the sake of my father. Their anecdotes painted a vivid picture of my father's greatness, and with each story, I grew more appreciative of the man he was. Confronted with the realization of my father's true worth, I found myself expressing remorse for not having recognized his greatness while he was alive. Speaking to his portrait after work, I couldn't help but feel a sense of shame as I looked at my oil-stained self. Yet, I began to view those stains as tangible evidence of my father's tireless work ethic. Determined to honor my father's legacy, I pledged to become a president who mirrored his virtues. I was resolute in my commitment to make his dream of expanding the town factory, a legacy passed down since my grandfather's generation, a reality. Addressing his portrait once again, this time with newfound determination, I spoke of my aspirations and felt an ethereal connection, as if my father were smiling down upon me. From that moment forward, I dedicated myself to working tirelessly, aspiring to become a president worthy of my father's legacy and realizing his dream of expanding the family's factory that had endured through generations.
I'm Sharon, an architect by trade, but today I'm stepping into the role of a bride, brimming with excitement as I walk down the aisle. Every detail of our wedding, from the flowers to the playlist, bears the mark of my meticulous planning. I've imagined this day as a scene plucked from a romance novel, a celebration of our love. At the altar stands Peter, my soon-to-be husband, an engineer with a practical, no-nonsense approach to life that complements my creative flair. Together, we've always felt like a perfect match, each enhancing the other's strengths. As I approach, I catch a glimpse of something troubled in his eyes, but I chalk it up to pre-wedding nerves. I overhear Peter's mother, Julie, whispering nearby, her gaze intense and unsettling. Despite her strained smile and compliments, her eyes betray a different sentiment. The ceremony continues, but Peter's vows lack the usual warmth, and there's a tense pause before he finally says, "I do." During the ring exchange, Julie insists on capturing the moment with a photo, her words tinged with an air of caution rather than celebration. At the reception, she offers backhanded compliments on my dress, highlighting its beauty while subtly critiquing its non-traditional style. With a light-hearted remark about celebrating love in our own unique way, I deflected Julie's subtle criticisms about our wedding choices. But before the conversation could escalate, Peter intervened, politely asking his mother for a moment alone with me. His interruption seemed like a defense of our decisions, yet his tone hinted at a resignation rather than genuine support. It felt oddly out of place on what should have been a day of pure joy. Scanning the crowd for reassurance, I hoped to find solace in the chaos of the wedding festivities. Yet, deep down, I sensed that something fundamental was wrong. The tension in the air was undeniable, and the red flags waved too boldly to ignore any longer. As Peter and I glided onto the dance floor for our first dance, the distance between us felt more than physical. Though our movements were synchronized emotionally, we were worlds apart. The song, meant to celebrate our unity, now felt like a cruel irony. When the music faded, Peter's attempt at reassurance only served to emphasize the growing chasm between us. "So, Mrs. Sharon, ready for forever?" he asked, the irony of his question hanging heavy in the air. I wanted to voice my doubts, to question whether our tomorrows would be overshadowed by the unease of today. But instead, I masked my concerns with a hesitant affirmation, clinging to the hope that the darkness looming over us would eventually dissipate, and that our rocky start was not indicative of what lay ahead. Unbeknownst to me, this day would merely serve as the overture to a challenging period that would test not only the resilience of our marriage but the very core of my identity. As we toasted to our union, the celebratory words felt hollow, overshadowed by an unsettling sense of loss. The journey back to my home, a charming 3-bedroom house that stood as a symbol of my hard-earned independence, marked the beginning of our shared life. This space was meant to be our sanctuary, the solid ground upon which we would build our future together. However, it quickly became the stage for a series of conflicts that felt more like invasions than the start of marital bliss. Julie, residing just a short distance away, began to visit with alarming frequency, often uninvited. Her criticisms were relentless, targeting everything from my culinary endeavors to the decor of our home. Whether lamenting the flavor of my dishes or the choice of bathroom tiles, her complaints were diverse but equally cutting. Peter's attempts to mediate were feeble at best, appearing more for show than genuine protection. Julie's intrusions became a regular ordeal, each visit an opportunity for her to assert dominance through thinly veiled insults and critiques. The pivotal moment arrived one afternoon when Julie showed up with suitcases in hand, her intentions clear and her sense of entitlement palpable. This wasn't just another visit, it was an invasion, threatening to smother the life out of our fledgling marriage. "I'll be staying here now," she declared, breezing past me to deposit her luggage in my favorite cozy corner by the window, my haven for quiet reflection and reading. "This spot will suit me just fine," Julie proclaimed, her tone leaving no room for argument. I turned to Peter, my eyes pleading for him to intervene, to uphold the sanctity of our home. This was a decision we should have made together. Sensing an opportunity, I called Peter aside, my voice trembling. "This is our home. Shouldn't we have discussed this first?" His gaze met mine, devoid of the warmth and affection that once filled it. "Mom's getting older, Sharon. It's not right for her to be alone. She needs to be with family," he explained, emphasizing the word family in a way that made me feel like an outsider. "So I'm not family? Is that what you're saying?" The words barely escaped my lips before tears welled up, a mix of hurt and frustration. Peter quickly responded, his patience wearing thin. "You know that's not what I mean. But I owe her this. What about us? What about what we owe to each other? We're supposed to be building our life together, not living with your mom," I argued. But it was as if I were speaking to a brick wall. My concerns, my feelings seemed insignificant, and just like that, Julie's move into our home was decided, overriding my wishes. With Julie's arrival, the atmosphere in our home shifted dramatically. Every corner, once filled with our shared dreams, now bore the weight of tension and conflict. My tranquil reading nook was swallowed by her belongings. The kitchen became a battleground for her criticisms, and Peter, the man I married, seemed more aligned with Julie than with me. It hit me that I wasn't just fighting for my marriage or my space anymore. I was fighting for my sense of self, my dignity, and my peace. A nagging thought lingered. How had it come to this? How had my desires, my space, and my voice become secondary to Julie's preferences? The change was stark. My cherished nook became a symbol of Julie's intrusion. The kitchen, a sight for her relentless scrutiny, and my husband had transformed into a stranger, siding with what felt like the opposing team. And this was only the beginning. Life, already challenging, spiraled into an unbearable nightmare as the oppressive atmosphere in our home mirrored the shrinking of my own space and voice. Adding to the mounting pressure, a discovery brought everything into sharp focus: the unmistakable presence of 2 blue lines on a pregnancy test, signaling a new life amidst the turmoil. This revelation intensified the situation, rendering the already dense atmosphere almost suffocating. Clutching the pregnancy test, my hands shook with a mix of anticipation and dread as I grappled with the realization that the stakes were now even higher. I had always imagined that discovering I was pregnant would be among the happiest moments of my life, filled with excitement and celebration. Yet, standing alone in the bathroom, tears welling in my eyes as I faced my reflection, I found this milestone felt more like a weighty burden. When I shared the news with Peter, his reaction fell disappointingly flat. "Well, that's something," he muttered, swiftly steering the conversation toward a renovation idea his mother had proposed. It became evident that Julie saw my pregnancy not merely as news, but as her new project. She took it upon herself to oversee every aspect, from my diet to the birthing plan, all under the guise of being helpful. Julie's interference quickly morphed into a form of control. She scrutinized every morsel I ate, casting judgmental glances at even the simplest meals and questioning my weight management, despite my assurances that my diet was doctor-approved. "Doctors these days have no clue," she scoffed dismissively, convinced that her outdated wisdom trumped modern medical advice. As the pregnancy progressed, Julie's demands became increasingly outrageous. She asserted control over my home, expecting me to maintain it to her exacting standards, regardless of my condition. "Sharon, why isn't the living room clean yet?" she would demand from her perch in my once tranquil reading nook, now usurped as her headquarters for endless phone scrolling and TV watching. My pleas for rest fell on deaf ears, with Julie dismissing pregnancy as no excuse for laziness. Peter's silence during these exchanges only exacerbated the tension. His lack of support became glaringly apparent, particularly during a dinner that devolved into an argument over baby names. Julie's harsh critique of my chosen name was the final straw. "Enough, Julie. This is my child, and I will decide how to name them," I countered, my patience worn thin. Her response was one of indignation, as if my assertion of control over my own life was a personal affront. Peter's attempts at mediation, siding with his mother and dismissing me as emotional, widened the rift between us. I was left feeling more isolated than ever, trapped in a home that had become a battlefield where my voice seemed to matter less and less. It was no longer just about choosing a baby name. It was about reclaiming my autonomy, my dignity, and the sense of belonging that had been systematically eroded by Julie's overbearing presence. Staring at the reflection of my once gleaming wedding ring, I scarcely recognized the woman gazing back at me, a woman who was slowly losing everything she cherished: her sanctuary, her self-respect, and most agonizingly, her resolve to stand up for herself. In the midst of one of our tense confrontations, Julie, brimming with a vindictive sense of triumph, delivered a crushing blow that changed everything. She icily suggested that maybe I didn't belong in their family if I couldn't handle a simple family disagreement. Peter's response, or lack thereof, was perhaps the most agonizing part. His silence spoke volumes, conveying that my suffering wasn't just beginning. It had been my reality for far too long. Days blurred together as I navigated through a house that no longer felt like mine, holding onto the only beacon of hope left, the life growing inside me. Yet even this small solace felt threatened in the toxic environment I found myself in. The breaking point arrived on a chilly evening during yet another agonizing family dinner. Despite my efforts to prepare a flawless meal, Julie's criticisms were relentless, attacking everything from the seasoning to the preparation. Her words felt like physical blows, each comment chipping away at my already fragile confidence. But it was her next jab that pierced the deepest, questioning my ability as a mother based on my supposed failure to manage household chores. Peter's acquiescence was the final straw, pushing me past my breaking point. Fueled by a potent mixture of anger, pent-up resentment, and sheer desperation, I found my voice. "Step it up? I've been carrying our child, managing our home, and enduring endless criticism from your mother, and you're telling me to step it up." The shock on their faces spoke volumes, but I was beyond caring. For too long, I had allowed myself to be diminished and demeaned. But in that moment, I reclaimed my voice. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. The clarity of my decision cut through years of suppression like a beacon of light. It was a declaration of my refusal to endure any more disrespect or emotional torment. I was prepared to fight for myself, for my child, and for a future liberated from the shadows that had clouded my life. As I spoke, my voice trembled with emotion, yet I remained resolute in my stance. I refused to raise my child in an environment where their mother was constantly undermined. If this is your idea of family, then count me out, I declared, my words ringing with finality as I rose from the dinner table, leaving behind their stunned silence. Gathering only the essentials, I made my way to the door, my hands shaking as I reached for the handle, eager to escape the oppressive atmosphere. Julie, ever the provocateur, seized the moment to deliver her most cutting remark yet. And where do you think you're going? This is Peter's house, not yours. Pausing, I turned to face her, my resolve steeling. Actually, Julie, this house is mine. I bought it. I decide who stays and who goes. Peter's voice broke through, laced with desperation. Sharon, please, let's talk about this. But I was beyond negotiation. There's nothing left to discuss. I replied, my tears a testament to the pain of my decision. Stepping out into the cold night felt like embarking on a new chapter of my life, one filled with uncertainty yet also tinged with a profound sense of liberation. The closing door behind me marked the end of a tumultuous saga, a final farewell to a life I could no longer endure. With each step, a mix of pain and determination coursed through me, fueled by the urgent need to reclaim my autonomy. The journey to my parents' home blurred with cold, exhaustion, and heartache. Just moments from the sanctuary of my childhood haven, a stumble sent me crashing to the ground, the physical pain a mere echo of my inner turmoil. Yet, far from deterring me, this fall only strengthened my resolve. Arriving at my parents' doorstep, the concern etched on their faces mirrored the gravity of my situation. As they rushed me to the hospital, I realized this moment of vulnerability marked not just an end, but a beginning. Lying in the hospital bed, the reality of my circumstances sinking in, I knew returning to my former life was not an option. This breaking point was a vital step towards reclaiming the life and dignity that had been stripped away, a painful yet necessary transition towards healing and independence. The clarity that accompanies such moments is profound, illuminating the path forward from the shadows of the past towards a future of my own creation. Amidst a whirlwind of emotions, I stood surrounded by the comforting yet anxious presence of my parents. Their unspoken concern spoke volumes about their fears regarding the true state of my marriage, now starkly unveiled in its troubled depths. Breaking the heavy silence, my mother voiced her concern, her words laden with the weight of the unfolding reality. Sharon, dear, what's your plan now? Uncertain yet determined. I'm not sure, Mom, but one thing's certain. I can't go back to that life. Not now, not ever. My declaration, more assured than I expected, resonated with newfound determination. My father, who had been pacing anxiously, paused to offer reassurance, emphasizing their unwavering support regardless of my decision. He urged me to consider not just my own future, but also the future of the life growing inside me. His words prompted a silent acknowledgement from me. My mind had been a battleground of uncertain scenarios, each fraught with the possibility of a fresh start. The unexpected buzz of my phone shattered my reverie. A message from Peter, a plea for communication. Yet to me, his timing felt like a door long closed. His words, unseen, were left hanging in the void as I powered off my phone, a symbolic end to our dialogue. My next steps became clear, marked by action rather than words. Consulting a family lawyer became my first decisive act towards untangling the turmoil of my marriage. With the unwavering support of my parents, we navigated the cold legal breakdown of our union, discussing divorce, custody arrangements, and financial support. Despite the sterile nature of these discussions, they empowered me, marking the initial steps towards seizing control of my destiny and securing the well-being of my unborn child. Within a week, Peter and Julie received the formal notices, divorce papers for Peter and an eviction notice for Julie from the home that was legally mine. Alongside these were demands for substantial child support and compensation for the emotional turmoil I had endured. Though drastic, these actions were imperative, severing the ties that had long bound me to a life of despair. When I eventually re-engaged with my phone, it was inundated with Peter's attempts to reconnect. His messages carried a blend of regret and a plea for reconciliation. Yet the wounds inflicted by nights of humiliation, years of neglect, and Julie's calculated malice, all silently condoned by Peter, ran too deep. The fleeting temptation to entertain his overtures was swiftly overshadowed by the memory of enduring pain. This moment wasn't merely about closing a chapter, it was about reclaiming my narrative, where the shadows of the past no longer dictated the brightness of my future. The love I once harbored for him had been utterly eclipsed by the sorrow of our shattered marriage. Taking decisive action, I purged his messages, erased his contact details, and blocked him across all social platforms. To me, Peter had become a relic of my history, a distressing chapter I was more than ready to close. Despite the knowledge that the road ahead would be rife with challenges, divorce, especially with a child on the way, is a complex journey. I was finally charting my own course, stepping out from the suffocating shadow that had enveloped me toward a future brimming with hope. On the day of the court proceedings, the atmosphere in the room bore the distinct sterile chill characteristic of spaces where destinies are determined. Seated beside me, my lawyer exuded confidence, while my parents offered silent yet unwavering support from behind. Across the aisle, Peter seemed adrift, the reality of the situation dawning upon him, while Julie's countenance oscillated between shock and defiance. As the session commenced, the judge entered, prompting everyone to rise. What followed was a whirlwind of legal proceedings, with accusations and evidence laid bare. It seemed as though Julie and Peter were seeing their actions for the first time, not just through the lens of the law, but through my perspective as well. When Julie was called to speak, her usual confidence waned. She attempted to justify her actions as concern for her son's well-being, but her explanation fell flat, especially under the judge's skeptical gaze. Judge Nina R. Morrison's verdict was unequivocal and resolute. I was granted a full divorce and sole custody of our unborn child. Peter was ordered to provide child support, while Julie, faced with a substantial fine for emotional abuse and harassment, appeared visibly shaken. As the judge's gavel fell, a wave of liberation washed over me, tinged with a hint of melancholy. My marriage hadn't concluded with dramatic confrontations, but rather with the quiet shuffling of papers and the unwavering voice of justice. This chapter of my life was sealed shut, paving the way for a fresh start unburdened by the chains of the past. The price of my newfound freedom was one I never could have foreseen on the day I exchanged vows. Exiting the courtroom, Peter approached with a bewildered expression, expressing his remorse and disbelief at the unraveling of our lives. Yet, as I looked into his eyes, I no longer saw my future, but rather a profound void where love once dwelled. I never envisioned this as our ending, Peter, but apologies can't undo what's been done, I asserted firmly, turning away to bid farewell to the past. Julie sought my gaze, perhaps in search of forgiveness or acknowledgement, yet I couldn't afford her that closure. She had taken too much from me, and I refused to grant her the satisfaction of witnessing the depth of her impact on my spirit. Stepping into the embrace of the outside world, it felt as though life welcomed me with open arms, the sun shining brighter and colors more vibrant. It was as if I viewed the world through a new lens, unclouded by the shadows of turmoil. My mother's embrace and words of pride brought tears to my eyes. "You're truly free now, Sharon," she said, her emotion palpable. "I couldn't have faced this without you and Dad." I responded, feeling an overwhelming gratitude for their unwavering support. That evening, in the tranquility of my home, now solely mine, I discovered a profound peace, alone yet far from lonely. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I was free to live by my own standards. The road ahead as a single mother appeared daunting. Yet as I sensed my unborn child's gentle movements, a wave of confidence enveloped me. We would navigate this journey together, I was certain of it. The trials I had weathered brought me to this juncture of self-discovery. Though they left scars, they told a story of resilience, not surrender. Gazing toward the horizon, I was not merely propelled by circumstance but propelled by choice. This realization filled me with a profound sense of empowerment, poised to embrace what lay ahead, not out of obligation but from a place of deliberate determination. I recognized that this was the dawn of a significant new chapter. I should have known Rebecca would ruin everything. She always did. But that night, watching her chat with my colleagues at the company anniversary party, glass of champagne in hand, I actually believed she was happy for me. My name is Alexandra Martin, and I was about to become the youngest VP of operations at Turner & Associates. At 32, it was everything I'd worked for. The culmination of 10 years of late nights, missed weekends, and relentless dedication. To Alex, Rebecca raised her glass, her designer dress catching the light. My brilliant big sister. Who would have thought that the girl who used to eat paste in kindergarten would end up here? Everyone laughed. Even my husband David, standing beside me, chuckled at the gentle ribbing. But there was something in Rebecca's smile that should have warned me. A sharp edge beneath the sweetness, like a razor blade wrapped in silk. I'd seen that look before, when she accidentally spilled red wine on my prom dress. When she told my college boyfriend I'd been cheating on him. When she convinced our parents to use my wedding fund for her startup idea instead. But this was different. I was different. At 32, I had finally built something she couldn't touch. A career I'd earned through merit, not manipulation. A marriage built on trust and understanding. I thought I was untouchable. I was wrong. The party was in full swing when I noticed Rebecca had disappeared. David was deep in conversation with some colleagues from accounting, and I was due to give my acceptance speech in 20 minutes. I headed to the ladies' room to touch up my makeup, my mind already on the words I practiced. That's when I heard Rebecca's voice, soft but clear, coming from around the corner. I hate having to tell you this, David, but as your sister-in-law, as someone who cares about you, you deserve to know. I froze, my hand still reaching for the bathroom door. Know what? David's voice was guarded. Rebecca, if this is about Alex. It is. I found something. On her phone. She left it unlocked at lunch last week, and I saw the messages. My heart stopped. What messages? I never left my phone unlocked, and I certainly hadn't had lunch with Rebecca in months. Messages? David's voice had dropped, taking on that quiet intensity I knew so well. What kind of messages? Between her and James, her boss. Rebecca's voice trembled with fake concern. They've been seeing each other for months. The promotion, it's not just about her work performance. The silence that followed was deafening. I wanted to step around that corner, to confront her lies, but my feet wouldn't move. This couldn't be happening. Not again. Not now. I have screenshots, Rebecca continued. I sent them to your phone. I'm so sorry, David. I know this must be devastating. I heard footsteps, David's, walking away quickly. Finally, I forced myself to move, to round that corner and face my sister. She was still standing there, phone in hand, that same sweet smile on her face. When she saw me, her eyes widened in mock surprise. Oh, Alex, I was just destroying my life. I finished for her, my voice surprisingly steady despite the rage building inside me. Again? She had the audacity to look hurt. I'm protecting David. He deserves to know the truth. What truth? I stepped closer, my hands shaking. Those messages are fake, Rebecca. You and I both know it. Her smile didn't waver. Do we? The timestamps match your late nights at the office. The pet names, the secret meetings. It's all there. And really, who would believe you didn't sleep your way to the top? A VP position at your age? Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A message from David. Don't come home tonight. Or any night. I can't even look at you. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring. In the main ballroom, I could hear James, my boss, beginning the promotion announcement. But it didn't matter anymore. In the space of 10 minutes, my sister had managed to destroy everything I built. Why? I whispered, looking up at her. What did I ever do to you? Rebecca's smile finally fell, revealing something darker underneath. You existed, she said simply. You were always the smart one, the successful one, the one everyone admired. Well, not anymore. She brushed past me, her expensive perfume lingering in the air. Better go tell James you won't be accepting that promotion after all. Sexual harassment scandals are so messy. I stood there frozen as my world crumbled around me. In the distance, I could hear applause as James announced my name. But all I could focus on was the message still glowing on my phone screen, and the realization that my sister had finally won. Or so she thought. Because what Rebecca didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that this time would be different. This time, I wouldn't just survive her betrayal. I would make her regret it. The next 5 years redefined everything I thought I knew about survival. The day after the party, I walked into James' office and resigned. His face showed confusion, then concern as I explained that I couldn't accept the promotion. I didn't tell him about Rebecca's lies. The shame was too fresh, too raw. David filed for divorce within a week. The evidence Rebecca had fabricated was thorough: doctored photos, fake text messages, even receipts from hotels I'd supposedly visited with James. My protest of innocence fell on deaf ears. After all, Rebecca was family. Why would she lie? I lost everything in the divorce. Our house, most of our friends, even our dog. David's lawyer painted me as an ambitious climber who'd do anything for success, including betraying my marriage. The irony was bitter. I'd worked so hard to earn everything honestly, only to be branded a cheat. But Rebecca had made one crucial mistake. In her eagerness to destroy my life, she'd forgotten to consider what I might do with nothing left to lose. I left Seattle behind, moving to Boston where an old college friend had connections at Milton and Green, a rising tech consulting firm. Starting over at 32 wasn't easy, but spite is a powerful motivator. I worked harder than ever, channeling my anger into excellence. This time, I was smarter. I kept detailed records of everything: emails, meetings, project successes. I made allies instead of friends, building a network of people who respected my work rather than my personality. And I watched from afar as Rebecca's life played out on social media. She married David 2 years after my divorce. I wasn't surprised. She'd always wanted what was mine. They looked happy in their photos, traveling the world, attending charity galas. Rebecca had finally gotten the life she thought she deserved. But I knew better than to trust appearances. Through my network, I kept tabs on her career moves. She'd started a tech company, SecureShare, using Dad's connections to secure initial funding. The company promised revolutionary blockchain security solutions, and Rebecca played her part well. The dynamic female founder disrupting a male-dominated industry. I almost admired her audacity. Almost. Then came the email I'd been waiting for, though I hadn't known it until that moment. A message from Rebecca herself, arriving late one Tuesday evening as I sat in my corner office at Milton and Green, where I'd just made partner. Dear Alex, I hope this email finds you well. I know we haven't spoken in years and I understand why, but I'm reaching out because I believe we can help each other. SecureShare is expanding and we're looking for strategic investors for our Series B funding round. Your reputation in the tech consulting world is impressive. I've followed your success from afar and I'm proud of what you've accomplished. We're offering early access to this investment opportunity to a select group of individuals. Given your expertise and our family connection, I wanted to extend this offer personally. The potential returns are substantial. We're projecting 300% growth over the next 2 years. I know our past is complicated, but perhaps this could be a fresh start for us as sisters and business partners. Let me know if you'd like to discuss further. Best regards, Rebecca. I read the email 3 times, each word burning into my brain. The sheer audacity of it, reaching out after 5 years as if she hadn't systematically destroyed my life. And yet, I opened my laptop and began researching SecureShare more thoroughly. The company had grown rapidly, but something about their financials didn't add up. The projected growth figures were too perfect, the client testimonials too polished. I made some calls to former colleagues in Seattle who still owed me favors. Within days, I had a clearer picture of what Rebecca had built and what she was trying to hide. SecureShare was a house of cards, built on manipulated data and empty promises. The blockchain technology they claimed to have developed was mostly smoke and mirrors. They were burning through investor money at an alarming rate, and Rebecca was desperately seeking new funding to keep the charade going. She needed my investment not just for the money, but for the legitimacy my name would bring. My success in tech consulting would encourage other investors, buying her more time to maintain her facade. I leaned back in my chair, a smile spreading across my face as I crafted my reply. Dear Rebecca, thank you for reaching out. You're right, it has been a long time. I'd love to discuss this investment opportunity in person. Perhaps we could meet in Boston next week. Looking forward to reconnecting. Best, Alex. Her response came within minutes, eager and relieved. We arranged to meet at my office the following Tuesday. As I confirmed the meeting, I felt a familiar sensation. that same cold fury that had driven me for the past 5 years. But now it was tempered with something else, anticipation. Because what Rebecca didn't know was that I'd spent those years building more than just a new career. I'd built a trap, and she was walking right into it. Rebecca arrived at my office exactly on time, dressed in a Chanel suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her smile was the same one I remembered from that night 5 years ago, sweet but sharp around the edges. "Alex?" She moved to hug me, but I stepped back, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. Her smile flickered but didn't fade. "You look different. Success suits you." I sat down, studying her. Up close, I could see the cracks in her perfect facade, the slight tremor in her hands, the tension around her eyes. She was desperate, though trying hard not to show it. "Let's skip the small talk," I said, opening my laptop. "Tell me about SecureShare's financials." For the next hour, I listened as Rebecca presented her company's story. The pitch was polished, full of buzzwords and promises of revolutionary technology. But beneath the surface, I could hear the desperation growing in her voice. "We're projecting significant growth," she said, pulling up a sleek presentation. "With this round of funding." "You mean with my money?" I interrupted quietly. She paused, then smiled. "Well, yes. Your investment would be crucial. We're offering you an incredible opportunity here, Alex. A chance to be part of something revolutionary." I nodded slowly, then turned my laptop around to face her. "Something revolutionary? Like these financial records?" The color drained from her face as she recognized the internal documents displayed on my screen. Documents that showed the truth about SecureShare's hollow promises and missing funds. "How did you get these?" I finished for her. "I have friends in interesting places, Rebecca. Friends who are very good at finding things people want to hide." "Those documents are confidential," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "You have no right." "Like you had no right to destroy my marriage? My career?" I kept my voice steady, watching her squirm. "The difference is, these documents are real, unlike those fake messages you showed David 5 years ago." She straightened in her chair, attempting to regain control. "That's ancient history, and you can't prove anything about those messages." "Actually, I can." I opened another file. "See, while you were busy playing startup founder, I had experts analyze those screenshots. They found proof they were doctored. I have signed statements confirming the forgery." "So what?" Her mask finally cracked, showing the anger beneath. "It doesn't matter now. David and I are married. You can't change that." "I don't want to change that," I said quietly. "What I want is for you to understand exactly what you're about to lose." I pressed a button on my desk phone. "Send them in, please." The door opened and 3 people walked in. James Turner, my former boss from Seattle. Sarah Chin, the lead investigator from the SEC. And Michael Harrison, David's business partner. Rebecca's face went ash white. "Ms. Martin," Sarah began formally, "we've been investigating SecureShare for months. The evidence your sister provided confirms our suspicions of fraud, misappropriation of investor funds, and multiple securities violations." "That's ridiculous," Rebecca stammered, but Michael cut her off. "Save it, Rebecca. I've already spoken to David about this. The firm is severing all ties with SecureShare. We can't risk being associated with fraud." James simply stood there, arms crossed, his presence a reminder of the career she tried to destroy. Rebecca turned to me, her composure completely shattered. "You planned this," she whispered. "All of it. The investment meeting, the investigation." "Yes," I said simply, "just like you planned to destroy my life 5 years ago. The difference is I didn't have to lie. Your own actions did all the work for me." "I'll lose everything," she said, her voice breaking. "The company, my reputation, David. Now you know how it feels." I stood up, gathering my papers. "The SEC has questions for you. I suggest you answer them honestly, for once in your life." As Rebecca was led away for questioning, I sat back down at my desk, feeling strangely empty. The revenge I planned for 5 years was complete, but it brought less satisfaction than I'd expected. Later that evening, as I stood at my office window watching the Boston skyline, my phone buzzed with a text from David. "I just heard about Rebecca, about everything. I'm sorry I didn't believe you back then." I didn't respond. Some bridges, once burned, should stay that way. A week later, the story broke in the business press. SecureShare's collapse was spectacular. taking Rebecca's reputation with it. She faced criminal charges for investor fraud, and David filed for divorce after learning the full extent of her deceptions. I watched it all from a distance, neither celebrating nor mourning. In the end, Rebecca's downfall wasn't really about revenge. It was about justice, about showing her that actions have consequences, that the truth eventually comes to light. My new corner office at Milton and Green felt different after that day. The view was the same, but the weight I'd carried for 5 years had lifted. I'd proven something not just to Rebecca, but to myself, that success built on truth would always outlast success built on lies. Sometimes at night, I still think about that company party 5 years ago, about the sister who thought she could take everything from me. She never understood that by trying to destroy me, she gave me the strength to rebuild something stronger. In the end, Rebecca's greatest mistake wasn't in betraying me. It was in underestimating what I would become because of that betrayal. The last I heard, she had moved back in with our parents, her dreams of success shattered by her own deceptions. Sometimes I wonder if she thinks about that night too, if she regrets the choices that led her here. But mostly, I focus on my own path forward. Because while Rebecca's story ended in ruins, mine was just beginning. And this time, I was writing it on my own terms. The call came at 2 a.m. local time, the phone's harsh ring cutting through the humid African night. I fumbled for it in the darkness of my temporary quarters, still half asleep. "Emma, you need to hear this." My sister Rachel's voice dripped with smug satisfaction. "I solved our little property dispute. I sold the house." I sat up slowly, suddenly wide awake. "You did what?" "Oh, don't act so surprised," she said with a laugh. "That house has been sitting empty for months while you're off playing humanitarian. Someone needed to do something about it. My name is Emma Chin, and I'm a trauma surgeon volunteering with Doctors Without Borders in Uganda. The house Rachel was talking about wasn't just any property, it was our family home, left to us jointly by our parents. The same house she'd been trying to force me to sell for the past year." "Rachel," I said carefully, keeping my voice steady despite the anger building in my chest, "you can't sell the house without my signature. I'm co-owner." Her laugh echoed through the phone. "Actually, I can. Remember that power of attorney you signed before you left? The one for emergencies? Well, I used it. The sale closed yesterday. $800,000 cash." My heart stopped. The power of attorney. I'd signed it thinking Rachel might need to handle medical decisions for me while I was abroad. I never imagined she'd use it to sell our childhood home. "The house is worth at least $3 million, I said, my mind racing. "Why would you sell it for a quarter of its value?" "The market's terrible right now," she replied dismissively. "Besides, I needed quick cash. David's investment opportunity won't wait forever." David. Of course, my sister's husband of 2 years, the financial genius who had already burned through their savings with his get-rich-quick schemes. "You know what?" Rachel continued, her voice sharp. "You don't get to complain. You abandoned everything to play doctor in Africa. Someone had to deal with reality back home." I closed my eyes, thinking about what was hidden inside that house. Something Rachel knew nothing about, something that would make her quick cash sale look like the disaster it truly was. "Who bought it?" I asked, trying to sound defeated. "Some development company. They're demolishing it next week to build condos." She paused, probably waiting for me to break down or beg. When I didn't, she added, "I'll have your share of the money transferred to your account. Minus my finder's fee, of course." Of course. Rachel had always been like this, entitled, selfish, convinced that everything should go her way. Our parents' death 2 years ago had only made it worse. "When's the demolition scheduled?" I asked, already pulling up flight options on my laptop. "Next Thursday." "Why?" "Planning to fly home and stop it?" She laughed again. "Don't bother. The sale's done, Emma. You can't change it." I thought about the hidden room behind the library wall, the one our father had built decades ago, about the safe embedded in its concrete floor and what lay inside it. "We'll see about that," I said quietly and hung up. The next few hours were a blur of activity. I arranged emergency leave from the hospital, booked the first available flight to Boston, and made some crucial phone calls. By sunrise, I was on my way to Entebbe International Airport. During the long flight home, I thought about the last conversation I'd had with our father, just days before the car accident that killed both our parents. "The safe holds everything," he'd said, pressing the key into my hand. "Documents, accounts, everything I've built. Rachel can never know. She's not ready for that responsibility. Promise me you'll protect it." I promised, not fully understanding what I was agreeing to. It wasn't until after their death that I finally opened the safe and discovered the truth about our family's legacy. The papers inside revealed that our father, the quiet librarian everyone knew, had been living a double life. He'd spent decades building a real estate empire under various aliases, accumulating properties and investments worth over $50 million. All of it hidden, protected, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. I kept the secret just as he'd asked. Even when Rachel started pressuring me to sell the house, I'd held firm. The safe and its contents had to be protected. Now, as my plane descended into Boston Logan International Airport, I pulled up the text I'd received from my father's old lawyer, Benjamin Wong. "Documents ready. Meeting set for tomorrow." She won't know what hit her. Rachel thought she'd won. She thought she'd finally beaten her older sister, the one who'd always played by the rules. But she had no idea what was coming. As I collected my luggage, another text came through, this one from Rachel. "Demolition team's doing a walkthrough tomorrow. Last chance to say goodbye to the old place." I smiled despite my exhaustion. Perfect timing. The taxi ride to my old apartment was surreal. Boston had changed in the months I'd been gone. Or maybe I had. The familiar streets felt different somehow, charged with purpose. I unlocked my apartment door, dropping my bags in the entryway. Everything was exactly as I'd left it, covered in a thin layer of dust. I went straight to my office, to the locked drawer where I kept my most important documents. The key to the safe was there, along with copies of everything inside it. Proof of our father's empire, documentation of every property, every account, every investment. Rachel thought she was selling a $3 million house. She had no idea she was sitting on the headquarters of a real estate empire worth 50 times that amount. My phone buzzed again. "Benjamin Wong. Everything in place for tomorrow. Are you sure you want to do this? It will destroy your relationship with her completely." I thought about Rachel's laugh when she told me about selling the house. About all the times she'd taken advantage, manipulated, and schemed her way through life. About how she used my trust against me, abusing the power of attorney I'd given her. Unsure, I texted back. "Some relationships need to be destroyed. Tomorrow would change everything." Rachel thought she was clever, selling the house quickly and quietly, but she was about to learn that our father had taught me far more than she'd ever known. I sat down at my desk and began reviewing the documents I'd need for tomorrow's meeting. Every detail had to be perfect, because when the dust settled, Rachel would finally understand what it meant to truly lose everything. And I would be there to watch it happen. The morning dawned crisp and clear as I pulled up to our family home for the last time. 2 black SUVs were already parked in the driveway, one belonging to the demolition company, the other to Rachel and David. I checked my watch, 9:15 a.m. Right on schedule. Rachel was standing on the front porch with David, watching as men in hard hats conducted their preliminary inspection. She froze when she saw me step out of my car. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her designer heels clicking against the wooden boards as she marched toward me. "I thought you were in Africa." "Surprise," I said calmly, adjusting my blazer. "I caught an early flight." David hung back, shifting uncomfortably. He'd always been wary of me, perhaps sensing that I saw through his smooth-talking facade. "You didn't need to come," Rachel snapped. "Everything's handled. The sale is final." "About that," I replied, pulling out my phone as a third vehicle turned into our driveway. "We need to talk." Benjamin Wong stepped out of his Mercedes, briefcase in hand. Rachel's eyes narrowed at the sight of our father's old lawyer. "What's he doing here?" "Mr. Wong," I called out, ignoring her question. Perfect timing. The demolition team's foreman approached, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Harrison," he said, addressing Rachel, "we're ready to begin the internal inspection." "Actually," I interrupted, "you'll want to wait on that. There are some ownership issues we need to address first." Rachel laughed, but I caught the nervous edge in it. "There are no issues. I had power of attorney. The sale is legitimate. The power of attorney, Benjamin said, opening his briefcase, was for medical emergencies only. It did not grant you authority to sell jointly owned property. What? Rachel's face flushed. That's not true. I had it reviewed by David's cousin who just passed the bar. I finished for her. Yes, I'm sure he did a thorough job. The foreman looked between us, clearly sensing trouble. Should we come back another time? No, Rachel said quickly. Proceed with the inspection. My sister is just being difficult. Actually, Benjamin interjected, pulling out a document. I have a court order preventing any demolition or alteration of this property pending investigation of fraudulent sale. Rachel's confidence finally cracked. Fraudulent? I had every right to sell a $3 million property for $800,000 without consulting your co-owner. I asked quietly to use a medical power of attorney for a real estate transaction to facilitate what appears to be deliberate property value manipulation. David stepped forward, his salesman smile in place. Look, Emma, if you're unhappy with the price, maybe we can. This isn't about the price, I cut him off. This is about what's inside the house. Rachel rolled her eyes, but I caught the flicker of uncertainty in her expression. Inside, it's empty. We cleared everything out months ago. I turned to Benjamin. Should we show them? He nodded, pulling out another document. Ms. Chen, would you like to do the honors? I led the group into the house, through the familiar hallways to the library. Rachel's heels echoed on the hardwood floors, her nervous energy palpable. What is this about, Emma? She demanded. If you're trying to stop the sale. It's too late for that, I said, stopping in front of the bookshelf that had always been our father's favorite. The sale was void the moment you signed the papers, but that's not why I'm here. I reached for the hidden latch behind Shakespeare's complete works, the one our father had shown me years ago. With a soft click, the entire bookshelf swung forward, revealing the hidden room behind it. Rachel gasped. David swore under his breath. The demolition foreman took an involuntary step back. What? What is this? Rachel whispered. This, I said, stepping into the concrete room, is our father's real legacy. The one he didn't trust you to know about. I knelt down and opened the safe embedded in the floor, the key turning smoothly in the lock. Inside lay decades of our father's careful planning, property deeds, account statements, corporate documents. Benjamin began laying out papers on the table. Your father, he explained, was more than just a librarian. He spent 30 years building one of the largest private real estate portfolios in Massachusetts, all under various aliases, all perfectly legal, all carefully hidden. Rachel stared at the documents, her face pale. How much? The current market value, Benjamin said, is approximately $50 million. David's eyes went wide. Rachel grabbed the edge of the table for support. And you, I said to my sister, just tried to sell the corporate headquarters of this empire for $800,000 to a shell company that, I suspect, is owned by David or one of his associates. David took a step backward, but Benjamin's assistant was already blocking the doorway. The FBI is very interested in this transaction, I continued, particularly given David's history of failed investment schemes and the suspicious timing of the sale. Rachel's legs gave out, and she sank into our father's old leather chair. You knew, she whispered. You knew all this time. Dad told me everything before he died, I confirmed. He made me promise to protect it until the right time. And you didn't tell me? Her voice cracked. Your own sister. I looked at her, really looked at her. The designer clothes, the perfect makeup, the entitled attitude that had defined her entire life. Dad knew you weren't ready, I said softly. And he was right. The first chance he got, you tried to sell his life's work for pennies on the dollar. Benjamin cleared his throat. The FBI agents are waiting outside. They have some questions about the attempted sale and the potential fraud involved. Rachel's head snapped up. Fraud? But I had power of attorney. A medical power of attorney, I corrected her. Using it for real estate transactions is fraud. Selling property significantly below market value to a connected party is fraud. And doing it all without proper authority is definitely fraud. 6 months later, I sat in Benjamin Wong's office, signing the final documents that would restructure our father's empire. Rachel and David were both facing federal fraud charges, their assets frozen pending investigation. Everything's in order, Benjamin said, sliding the papers into his briefcase. "The foundation is established and the scholarship fund will launch next month." I nodded, thinking about how our father would have approved. The bulk of his fortune would now fund educational opportunities for underprivileged students, turning his secret empire into a force for good. "Have you heard from Rachel?" he asked carefully. "Not since the indictment," I replied. "She tried calling a few times in the beginning, alternating between threats and tearful pleas for help. But after I testified about her fraudulent use of the power of attorney, she finally understood that there was no going back." The house still stood, though I'd had it completely renovated. The hidden room was now a secure office, its existence properly documented. The demolition company had been revealed as a front for David's latest scheme. He planned to flip the property for its true value once the fraudulent sale went through. My phone buzzed. A message from the hospital in Uganda. "When are you coming back? We miss our best surgeon." I smiled, thinking about how different my life was from what Rachel had imagined. She'd always seen my volunteer work as running away from real life. She never understood that I'd chosen that path precisely because I could, because our father had secretly ensured we'd never want for anything. "The FBI finished their asset trace," Benjamin said, pulling up some documents on his computer. It seems David had set up quite an elaborate network of shell companies. He was planning to use your father's house as collateral for some substantial loans. "Let me guess," I said dryly. "More investment opportunities?" Benjamin nodded. Rachel claimed she didn't know the full extent of his plans. "She knew enough," I replied. "The evidence had been clear: emails, phone records, bank transfers showing she was fully aware of the scheme to defraud me." Standing at the window of Benjamin's office, I looked out over the Boston skyline. Somewhere out there, Rachel was preparing for her court date, probably still believing she was somehow the victim in all this. "Your father would be proud," Benjamin said quietly. "Not just of how you protected his legacy, but of what you're doing with it." The Scholarship Foundation had already selected its first recipients, bright, ambitious students who reminded me of our father. The quiet ones, the careful planners, the ones who understood that true success wasn't about quick profits or shortcuts. My phone buzzed again, this time an email from the real estate management company. The first round of renovations on our father's properties was complete. What had once been hidden was now being transformed into affordable housing units, community centers, and educational spaces. "Do you ever regret it?" Benjamin asked. "Exposing everything? You could have just stopped the sale quietly, kept the secret." I thought about Rachel's laugh during that late-night phone call, her casual dismissal of everything our father had built. "No," I said firmly. "Some secrets need to be revealed. Some lessons need to be learned." Later that evening, as I packed for my return to Uganda, I found an old photo album. In it was a picture of Rachel and me as children, sitting in our father's library, surrounded by the books that had concealed his empire. We were smiling, unaware of the secrets hidden behind those shelves. I closed the album, thinking about how differently things had turned out from what either of us had expected. Rachel had thought she was seizing an opportunity, never imagining she was actually destroying her future. I had become the keeper of our father's legacy, not just protecting his wealth but transforming it into something meaningful. The next morning, as my plane took off for Uganda, I received one final text from Benjamin. Guilty plea entered. Rachel took a deal, 3 years with restitution. I turned off my phone, watching Boston disappear beneath the clouds. 3 years was nothing compared to the lifetime of trust she'd broken. But maybe, just maybe, it would be enough time for her to understand what our father had known all along. That true wealth isn't just about money, and true success isn't built on shortcuts and schemes. As for me, I had patience waiting, lives to save, and a legacy to fulfill. Rachel had tried to sell our father's house for a quick profit, never knowing she was sitting on an empire. But in the end, the house had kept its secrets until the right moment, just as our father had planned. Sometimes, I thought as the plane headed east, the best revenge isn't about destroying someone else's dreams. Sometimes, it's about fulfilling your own, and letting them watch from the sidelines as you build something greater than they could have imagined. The house still stands in Boston, its secrets now transformed into opportunities for others. And somewhere in Uganda, there's a hospital where a surgeon works to save lives, carrying on a different kind of legacy. One that can't be measured in dollars or deeds, but in the lives touched and the changes made. That's the thing about legacy, after all. It's not just about what you leave behind. It's about what you choose to build with what you've been given. And I chose to build something worth more than all the quick profits Rachel had ever dreamed of. That's a revenge that would have made our father proud. The cafe in Montmartre was exactly the kind of place Rebecca would choose. Elegant, overpriced, and perfect for people who wanted to be seen. I watched her through the window, sipping her €15 latte while scrolling through her phone, not a care in the world. She hadn't changed much in 5 years. Same perfectly styled blonde hair, same designer clothes, same air of casual superiority. The only difference was that now she was living off our parents' retirement savings, all $4.2 million of them. My name is Sarah Matthews, and I've spent the last 5 years hunting down my sister. Not for revenge, though God knows I wanted it. No, this was about justice, about making things right for our parents who now worked retail jobs in their 70s because their brilliant investment advisor daughter had cleaned up their accounts and disappeared. I checked my watch, 2:45 p.m. Right on schedule. Taking a deep breath, I adjusted my dark wig and sunglasses, picked up my designer handbag, a clever fake, and walked into the cafe. Bonjour, I said to the hostess in carefully practiced French. I'm meeting someone. Ah, there she is. I pointed to Rebecca's table by the window. Before the hostess could stop me, I walked over and sat down across from my sister. Rebecca looked up, annoyed at the intrusion, then froze as I removed my sunglasses. Hi, Bex, I said quietly, using her childhood nickname. Long time no see. The color drained from her face. Sarah? What? How did you find you? I smiled, though there was no warmth in it. That's an interesting story. Almost as interesting as how you managed to forge Mom and Dad's signatures on those transfer documents. She glanced toward the door, calculating. I could practically see the wheels turning in her head. Could she make a run for it? Create a scene? Call security? Don't bother, I said, opening my handbag and pulling out a manila envelope. Running won't help. Not this time. What do you want? She hissed, her perfectly manicured hands clenching around her coffee cup. Money? Is that it? Come to guilt trip me into sharing. I laughed, the sound sharp enough to make heads turn at nearby tables. Money? You think that's why I spent 5 years tracking you down? No, Bex. I'm here because you destroyed our family. And now you're going to help me fix it. She leaned back, some of her old confidence returning. Or what? You'll tell the police? Go ahead. There's no proof I did anything wrong. The transfers were all legal, signed and notarized. I opened the envelope and slid out a stack of papers. Actually, that's where you're wrong. See, while you were living it up in Paris, I've been very, very busy. Her eyes flickered to the documents, then back to my face. What is this? This, I said, tapping the papers, is everything. Every forged document, every fake signature, every illegal transfer, and most importantly, proof of where the money went. Would you like to know how I found it all? She didn't answer, but I could see fear creeping into her eyes. It started with Dad's signature on the final transfer form. I continued. You were always good at forgery. Remember all those report cards you used to fake in high school? But you made one mistake. Dad's arthritis was acting up that week, and his signature would have been shakier than usual. Yours was perfect, too perfect. Rebecca's hand trembled as she reached for the papers, but I pulled them back. That got me thinking, what else had you faked? So I did some digging. A lot of digging. Did you know Mom kept all their old bank statements? Every single one, going back 20 years. It took months, but I compared every signature, every document, every transaction. You're bluffing, she whispered, but we both knew she didn't believe that. I pulled out my phone and opened a series of photos. This is you at HSBC Paris, opening an account under the name Rebecca Lauren. This is you transferring funds through 3 different shell companies. And this, I swiped to the last image, is you meeting with Jean-Paul Dupont last week. She flinched at the name. How do you know about Jean-Paul? Your business partner? The one helping you launder money through his art gallery? Oh, I know all about him. including the fact that he's already under investigation by the French Financial Crimes Unit. For the first time, real fear showed on my sister's face. Sarah, listen. No, I cut her off. You listen. In about 30 seconds, a man is going to walk through that door. He's from Interpol's Financial Crimes Division. The only reason he's not already here is because I convinced him to give me a chance to talk to you first. She glanced at the door, panic rising in her eyes. But, I continued, there might be another option. If you're interested. Rebecca's eyes snapped back to me. What kind of option? I pulled out another envelope. The kind that keeps you out of prison. But trust me. Sister dear, you're not going to like it. The cafe door chimed as it opened. Rebecca's face went white as she saw the tall man in a dark suit walk in. Time's up, I said softly. What's it going to be? Rebecca's hand shot across the table, grabbing the second envelope. What do you want? She whispered urgently, eyes darting between me and the Interpol agent who was now speaking quietly with the hostess. I smiled, feeling a grim satisfaction at seeing my usually composed sister so rattled. It's quite simple, really. You're going to give the money back. All of it. She let out a strangled laugh. Simple? Sarah, I can't just. It's not that easy. The money's tied up in investments, properties. You in the art gallery, the townhouse in the 16th arrondissement, the Swiss bank accounts. I leaned forward. I told you, Bex, I know everything. The Interpol agent was slowly making his way through the cafe, apparently checking each table. We had maybe 2 minutes left. Even if I wanted to, Rebecca hissed, I can't liquidate everything immediately. It would take time. 3 days, I said firmly. You have 3 days to transfer everything back to our parents' accounts. The routing numbers are in that envelope, along with instructions for how to make it look legitimate. Her eyes narrowed. And if I don't? I nodded toward the approaching agent. Then I stopped stalling him. Everything I've discovered goes to Interpol, the FBI, and the French authorities. You'll spend the next decade in prison, and Jean Paul right along with you. You do that to your own sister? My sister? I felt a surge of anger. My sister died the day she stole our parents' future and ran away to Paris. You're just the criminal wearing her face. The agent was just 2 tables away now. Rebecca's hands shook as she opened the envelope, scanning the contents quickly. 3 days, she asked, her voice barely audible. I nodded. And Rebecca? If you try to run, if you try to hide the money, if you do anything except exactly what those instructions say. I gestured to the approaching agent. Well, let's just say this is only a small taste of what I can do. She swallowed hard, then forced a smile as the agent reached our table. Mademoiselles, he said politely, I apologize for the interruption. We are conducting a routine check. I held up my hand, speaking in French. No need, Inspector Rousseau. My sister and I were just finishing our conversation. Weren't we, Bex? Rebecca clutched the envelope to her chest and nodded. Yes, we were. I stood up, gathering my things. Remember, 3 days. Don't disappoint me again. As I walked out of the cafe, I heard Rebecca engaging the inspector in rapid French, probably trying to appear normal, unworthy of suspicion. But I knew her too well. She was already planning, calculating, trying to figure out a way around this. What she didn't know was that I had planned for that too. Back in my hotel room, I called the one person who had helped make this all possible. It's done, I told Marcus, my voice finally betraying my exhaustion. She took the bait. Marcus, my best friend since college and now one of the top forensic accountants in New York, chuckled. Of course she did. You didn't give her a choice. But do you really think she'll do it? Return the money? I sat down heavily on the bed, kicking off my heels. She'll try to find a way out first. Probably contact some of her shadier friends, look for escape routes. But when those fall through, when they fall through because we've already blocked them all, Marcus interjected. Right. When she realizes she's truly trapped, she'll follow the instructions. Rebecca's a survivor. She'll choose losing the money over losing her freedom. And the inspector? He play his part well? I smiled, remembering the look on Rebecca's face. Perfectly. She never suspected he was just an actor I hired. Having him there made everything else I said more credible. Speaking of credible, Marcus said, his tone turning serious. What about the real authorities? You know she's actually guilty of everything you accused her of. I know, I sighed. But prosecuting her wouldn't get our parents' money back. This way, if she cooperates, everyone wins. She stays out of jail, our parents get their retirement back, and I paused. And you what? And I can finally stop hunting her, stop letting her take up space in my head. After hanging up, I walked to the window. Paris sparkled in the evening light, the Eiffel Tower beginning to glow against the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, my sister was probably frantically trying to find a way to outsmart me. Let her try. I'd spent 5 years becoming an expert in financial crimes just to understand how she'd done it. I learned French, studied international banking laws, built a network of contacts in the financial world. I'd sacrificed my own career, used up my savings, dedicated every waking moment to this pursuit. Rebecca had always underestimated me. To her, I was just the quiet younger sister who played by the rules. She never understood that playing by the rules had taught me exactly how to break them when necessary. My phone buzzed. A text from one of my contacts at the airport. Rebecca had just tried to book a flight to Singapore, only to find her passports, all 3 of them, mysteriously blacklisted. Another buzz, her attempt to wire money to a Cayman Islands account had been blocked. A third message, her call to Jean-Paul had gone straight to voicemail because he was currently in police custody on unrelated charges. Charges that would disappear once Rebecca returned our parents' money, though she didn't know that part yet. I smiled as the messages kept coming in. Every escape route closing, every backup plan failing. I'd spent 5 years building this cage around her, making it look like coincidence and bad luck rather than careful planning. By tomorrow, she'd realize she was trapped. By the day after, she'd understand that her only way out was through me. And on the 3rd day, our parents would wake up to find their accounts restored, their future secured. As for Rebecca, well, that would depend entirely on her next move. On the 3rd morning, I sat in my hotel room watching the numbers on my laptop screen. 3 separate banking apps were open, each showing our parents' accounts. At exactly 9:00 a.m. Paris time, the first transfer came through, 1.2 million euros. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. It's starting. She's actually doing it. I didn't reply, my eyes fixed on the screen as more transfers appeared. By 9:15, the total had reached 2.8 million euros. Rebecca was cutting it close. She had until noon to complete the transfers according to my instructions. At 11:30, my phone rang. Rebecca. I've done it, she said without preamble, her voice tight. Every cent. Are you happy now? I checked the final totals. $4.2 million, exactly what she'd stolen. You did what you had to do, nothing more. So that's it, she laughed bitterly. You've ruined everything I built here, and now you just walk away. Everything you built? I felt my careful control slipping. You built nothing, Rebecca. You stole from our parents, from the people who gave you everything. They're working at Walmart at 70 years old because of you. There was a long pause. I never meant for that to happen, she said quietly. I had debts, and then an opportunity came up, and I thought I could double their money, make everything right. Save it? I cut her off. I don't care about your excuses. The money's back where it belongs. That's all that matters. What am I supposed to do now? For the first time, she sounded scared. I have nothing left. You have exactly what you deserve, I replied. But since you complied with my demands, I'll keep my end of the bargain. The authorities won't hear about this from me. Sarah, wait. I hung up, cutting off whatever plea or manipulation she was about to attempt. 5 years of pursuit, of sacrifice and determination, and it ended with a simple phone call. My hands were shaking as I dialed another number, home. Hello, my mother's voice, tired from another early morning shift. Mom, you should check your bank account. What? Sarah, what are you talking about? Just look, Mom. Please. I heard shuffling, the clicking of a keyboard, then silence. Mom? A sob broke through the phone. Sarah, how? Is this real? It's real, Mom, all of it. You and Dad can retire now. For real this time. But how did you? She stopped. Rebecca, you found her? Yes, I said simply. I found her. Where is she? Is she okay? Classic mom, still worried about her eldest daughter even after everything. She's fine. Better than she deserves to be, but she won't bother us again. After promising to explain everything when I got home, I hung up and walked to the window. Paris was bright and clear, the morning sun glinting off the buildings. Somewhere out there, my sister was probably already planning her next move, figuring out how to rebuild. That was who she was, always moving forward, never looking back at the damage she left behind. But this time, she'd be doing it without our parents' money, without the safety net she'd stolen. My phone buzzed again. "Marcus, you did it. It's really over." I typed back, "Not quite. One more thing to do." Opening my laptop, I sent a single email to Jean-Paul Dupont's lawyer. As promised, the evidence that would clear him of his current legal troubles was attached. Honor among thieves, even if they didn't know they were working for me. Then I began booking my flight home. But not before sending one final message. But one that would ensure she could never pull this kind of scam again. Ask Rebecca Matthews about the $4.2 million she stole from her elderly parents. Ask her what happened when her sister caught up with her. Petty? Maybe, but sometimes justice needs a little help spreading the word. As I packed my bags, I thought about the past 5 years. I put my life on hold, spent every resource I had, learned things I never wanted to know about the dark side of international finance. Was it worth it? My phone buzzed one last time, a photo from Dad. He was holding his retirement notice, grinning like I hadn't seen him grin in years. Mom was beside him, crying happy tears. Yeah, it was worth it. That evening, as my plane took off from Charles de Gaulle Airport, I looked down at the city where my sister had hidden for so long. Paris would recover from Rebecca Matthews. Cities always do. Just like our family would recover, stronger now that the wound had been cleaned and bandaged. I thought about Rebecca, probably already working on her next reinvention. Part of me wondered if I should feel guilty about taking everything from her. But then I remembered our parents working doubles at minimum wage jobs because their daughter had stolen their dreams. No, I decided. Rebecca had made her choices. Now she had to live with the consequences. As for me, I had a family to go home to and a life to restart. 5 years of obsession and pursuit had changed me, taught me things about myself I never knew. I was stronger than I'd thought, more capable than anyone, including Rebecca, had ever given me credit for. My phone buzzed one last time as we reached cruising altitude, a text from an unknown number. "This isn't over, little sister." I smiled, typing back, "Yes, Rebecca, it is. And if you ever try anything like this again, remember, I'll find you. I'll always find you." Then I turned off my phone, ordered a glass of champagne, and watched the sun set over the clouds. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying someone. It's about protecting the people they tried to hurt. Our parents had their future back. Rebecca had her consequence. And me? I had my peace. Hi, I'm Sarah Chen. From a young age, technology fascinated me in ways most kids couldn't understand. While others played with toys, I was busy dismantling and rebuilding old computers. My parents weren't wealthy, but they always nurtured my curiosity, even as our living room transformed into a makeshift lab of circuit boards and tangled wires. "Sarah, honey, what's your latest project?" my mom would ask, carefully maneuvering around my cluttered workspace. "Just tweaking the processing speed," I'd reply, focused intently on my task. She'd smile, shaking her head with a mix of amusement and exasperation. "Just make sure it's all cleared away by dinner." Despite our financial struggles, I earned a scholarship to study computer science. By my final year, I had developed a groundbreaking AI algorithm that drew attention from top tech firms. One company even offered $50 million for it. I accepted the deal but kept my newfound wealth a secret. No extravagant lifestyle or flashy purchases, just strategic investments and relentless pursuit of innovation. I wanted to be known for my work, not my money. That's when I met David. We first crossed paths at a coffee shop where I was engrossed in my laptop. David accidentally spilled his coffee, narrowly avoiding my device. "Oh no, I'm so sorry," he blurted, frantically reaching for napkins. "It's fine, really," I said with a laugh, helping him clean up. "I'm Sarah." "David, let me buy you another coffee to make it up to you." One coffee turned into dinner, and dinner blossomed into a relationship. David was kind, funny, and endlessly supportive, even if he didn't fully grasp my work. A year later, we got married in a simple, heartfelt ceremony. Then I met his family, including his sister, Jessica. From the outset, Jessica made her disdain clear. As a senior executive at Turner Tech, one of the city's largest tech firms, she exuded an air of superiority. "So Sarah, what do you do?" she asked during our first family dinner, her tone dripping with condescension. "Freelance work and some cleaning jobs," I replied, choosing to keep my accomplishments under wraps. "Oh, how quaint," she said, exchanging smug glances with their mother, Linda. What they didn't know was that Turner Tech had long been on my radar. The company was riddled with inefficiencies, and I saw vast potential for improvement. So I took an unconventional route. I applied for a cleaning position. "A cleaner? Are you serious?" David asked, bewildered. "But you have a degree in computer science." "Trust me," I said with a knowing smile. "I have my reasons." When Jessica spotted me in my cleaning uniform, her shock was palpable. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, pulling me aside. "Working," I said simply. "Just stay out of my way," she hissed. "And don't tell anyone you're my sister-in-law. It's embarrassing enough having you in the family." For 6 months, I cleaned offices, quietly observing the company's inner workings. I noted wasteful spending, toxic management practices, and overlooked opportunities. Meanwhile, Jessica seized every opportunity to belittle me. At a family gathering, she announced her latest promotion with smug satisfaction. "I'm now vice president of operations," she declared. "Some of us actually have ambition." She cast a pointed look in my direction. David squeezed my hand under the table but remained silent. His lack of support stung more than Jessica's insults. The annual family dinner, hosted at Jessica's lavish new home, was the breaking point. "So Sarah," she began loudly, "how's the cleaning going?" "Must be riveting, emptying trash cans all day." Before I could respond, she continued, "We had a board meeting today about the company's future. Of course, you wouldn't understand such things. You were probably too busy scrubbing toilets." Laughter rippled through the room, except from David's grandmother, who looked deeply uncomfortable. Actually, a calm voice interrupted from the doorway. "She understands more than you think." All heads turned to see Mr. Thompson, Turner Tech's CEO, standing there. Jessica's face drained of color. "Mr. Thompson, what are you doing here?" she stammered. He smiled and glanced at me. "I came to welcome our new owner." The room fell into stunned silence. Jessica's fork clattered onto her plate. "Owner?" Linda echoed weakly. "Yes," I said, standing. "I acquired controlling shares in Turner Tech last week. For the past 6 months, I've been learning the company from the ground up." Jessica's face flushed with fury. "This is absurd. I've worked at Turner Tech for 8 years. I'm a vice president." "And also a thief," Mr. Thompson said firmly. "You've been embezzling company funds for 3 years. We have proof." Gasps echoed around the table as Jessica stammered denials. I opened a folder I brought. "The cleaning staff notices everything, Jessica, including your falsified expense reports. Every penny you stole has been documented." Linda turned to me, pleading. "Sarah, surely you won't press charges against family." I met her gaze evenly. "Family? For years, you and Jessica have treated me like I was beneath you, mocked me, excluded me, and made David ashamed of his own wife." "I wasn't ashamed," David protested weakly. "Then why did you never defend me?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. "Why did you let Jessica dictate my worth in your eyes?" David looked down, unable to respond. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat, breaking the heavy silence. "Mrs. Chen, shall we discuss the next steps?" "Yes," I said, turning to Jessica. "You have 2 choices. Option 1, resign immediately, repay every cent you stole, and sign a non-disclosure agreement. Option 2, I press charges and you face the legal consequences." Jessica's eyes darted around the room, searching for an ally. Finding none, she slumped back in her chair. How much time do I have to decide?" she whispered. "Until tomorrow morning," I replied firmly. "And Jessica? Clean out your office tonight. Either way, your time at Turner Tech is over." Linda rose from her seat, her face flushed with anger. "This is outrageous. David, are you going to let her ruin your sister's career?" David hesitated, his face troubled. Mom, if Jessica really stole money. Of course you take her side. Linda snapped. She's been manipulating you from the start. Actually, Mr. Thompson interjected calmly, Mrs. Chen has been more than fair. The evidence against Jessica would typically result in immediate arrest. Offering her a chance to repay the money is an extraordinary act of generosity. I gathered my things and stood. Mr. Thompson, shall we? I believe this family dinner has come to an end. As we made our way to the door, Jessica's voice rang out. Wait, what about my house, my car? They're all financed through my Turner Tech benefits. I turned back, meeting her panicked gaze. The company will repossess them, of course. You might want to start packing. The following days were a whirlwind. Jessica chose option 1, resigning and agreeing to repay nearly $300,000 in embezzled funds. Her glamorous lifestyle evaporated overnight, forcing her to move back in with Linda and Richard. Meanwhile, David repeatedly tried to reach me. I had moved into a hotel, needing space to think. Sarah, please, he begged over the phone. Can we talk about this? About what, David? The way you let your family treat me like I didn't belong. Or how you stood by while they tore me down for 3 years. I didn't know about your success, about Jessica's stealing. I didn't know any of it. That's not the point, I said quietly. You knew how they treated me, and you did nothing. My worth as your wife shouldn't have depended on my bank account. I threw myself into reforming Turner Tech. The company needed a complete overhaul, and I was determined to see it through. Each day brought me challenges, but the work was rewarding. Then, one morning, my assistant buzzed in. Mrs. Chen, your mother-in-law is here. Security called up. She's demanding to see you. I sighed, already weary of the confrontation. Send her up. Linda stormed into my office, her face a mask of fury. How dare you do this to our family? Jessica is devastated. I met her gaze calmly. Jessica devastated herself when she decided to steal from the company. I merely exposed the truth. She made a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. 3 years of systematic theft isn't a mistake, Linda. It's a calculated crime. Her shoulders sagged slightly as she collapsed into a chair. She can't find another job. No one will hire her with this scandal. She created the scandal, I said evenly. Actions have consequences. Linda's tone softened, turning pleading. Please, we're family. Surely we can find a way to fix this. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. Family? Let's recap, Linda. Last Christmas, you told everyone I wasn't invited to the family gathering because the help shouldn't mingle with guests. At David's birthday party, you seated me in the kitchen with the catering staff. When I got sick last year, you told David he should have married someone more suitable. Linda's face flushed with embarrassment. We didn't know who you really were then. And that's the problem, I said firmly. You judge me based on status, not character. Now that you know I'm wealthy, suddenly I'm family? Let me be clear. I'm the same person I've always been, and I won't protect you from the consequences of your choices. Linda stood, straightening her expensive jacket. So that's it? You're willing to destroy our family over a few harsh words? No, Linda, I replied. Your family destroyed itself through its actions. I'm just refusing to shield you from reality anymore. After she left, I stared out my office window as the sun set, painting the city in warm hues. My phone buzzed. Another message from David. Please come home. We can work this out. I love you. I typed back, sometimes love isn't enough. Respect matters too. The weeks that followed were a blur of change. Turner Tech transformed under my leadership, with new policies, fresh talent, and streamlined operations. Yet my personal life remained in disarray. David's attempts to reach me grew more desperate. One evening, my assistant buzzed in again. Your husband is here. He says he won't leave until you see him. I sighed, sent him in. David walked in, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. His tie hung loose, and his usually neat hair was unkempt. Sarah, he said, his voice raw. We need to talk, really talk. About what, David? About us. About everything. He sank into a chair, his shoulders slumped. I've been thinking a lot. I failed you. I was a coward. I stayed silent, waiting. When Jessica and Mom treated you badly, I told myself it wasn't serious, that family dynamics are complicated. But I was wrong. I avoided confrontation because it was easier, and I let you down. Yes, you did, I said quietly. But Sarah, why didn't you tell me about your success? About your wealth? We're supposed to be partners. I walked to the window, looking out over the city lights. Do you remember last Christmas at your parents' house? Jessica joked about me being the cleaning lady who trapped her brother. Everyone laughed. You laughed too, David. He flinched. I didn't mean. That night, I almost told you everything. But I stopped. I realized that if you couldn't respect me as a cleaner, you didn't deserve to know me as a CEO. That's not fair, David protested. Isn't it? I asked, turning to face him. Your family's treatment of me showed me exactly who they were. And your silence? That showed me exactly who you were. Before he could respond, my phone buzzed. It was Mr. Thompson. Sarah, we have a situation. Jessica's trying to access the company's servers remotely. She's attempting to delete files. My stomach dropped. Stop her, immediately. It's already handled, he replied, his tone grim. But there's more. She's been emailing confidential information to our competitors. I locked eyes with David, who had heard every word. Do you know about this? His shock seemed genuine. No, I swear, Sarah, I had no idea. Picking up the desk phone, I called security. Escort Mr. Chen out, then notify the police. We have evidence of corporate espionage. David grabbed my hand. Wait, Sarah, let me talk to her. Maybe I can reason with her. The time for talking is over, David. Your sister is trying to destroy my company. Within hours, the police arrested Jessica at her parents' house. They uncovered laptops filled with stolen data and emails offering Turner Tech's secrets to competitors. Linda called me later, furious. You've gone too far. First, you humiliate her, then take her job, and now this? She's your sister-in-law. She committed a crime, Linda. Multiple crimes. The evidence shows she's been planning this for weeks. She was desperate. You pushed her to this. No, Linda, I said firmly. She chose this. Just like she chose to steal from the company. Just like you chose to treat me like dirt for years. The next day, headlines blazed. Former VP arrested for corporate espionage. Jessica's polished corporate headshot was juxtaposed with her mugshot, and the fall from grace was splashed across every major news outlet. David came to my office, his face lined with anguish. Sarah, please, he said, she's my sister. There must be something you can do. I studied him, my voice calm but unwavering. You know what hurts the most, David? Even now, after everything she's done, you're still defending her. I'm not choosing sides. Yes, you are, I said, holding his gaze. Your sister stole hundreds of thousands of dollars, sold company secrets, and tried to ruin everything I've built. Yet you're here, begging me to protect her. Again. His shoulders slumped. What do you want me to do? I want you to finally make a choice, David. Not the easy one. The right one. Are you asking me to choose between you and my family? No, I said quietly. I'm asking you to decide what kind of man you want to be. The investigation unearthed even more than we anticipated. Jessica's theft and betrayal stretched back months, costing Turner Tech millions. It prompted sweeping reforms, tighter security, stricter audits, and a culture overhaul. One evening, my assistant brought me a letter from David. Mrs. Chen, she said, hesitating. He said it's important. Opening it, I read the familiar handwriting. Dear Sarah, you were right. I've spent my life avoiding conflict and taking the easy path. But in doing so, I failed the one person I vow to love and protect. Today, I testified against Jessica. It wasn't easy, but the prosecutor says my statement will ensure she faces the consequences of her actions. My parents are furious. Mom won't speak to me, and Dad says I've betrayed the family. But for the first time, I know I'm doing what's right. I don't expect this to fix things between us. I lost you long before Jessica's crimes came to light. Every time I stayed silent, every time I chose comfort over courage. I've moved out of my parents' house and started seeing a therapist. I need to understand why I let fear dictate my choices for so long. I love you, Sarah. But I understand now, love without respect and action isn't enough. Whatever you decide about us, I want you to know that I'm finally becoming the man I should have been. David. Tears blurred the ink as I reread his words. The next morning, Jessica pleaded guilty in court. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to repay $2.3 million. Months passed. Turner Tech thrived under its new leadership, and I finally felt the satisfaction of a company built on integrity. Meanwhile, David started volunteering at a tech center for underprivileged kids, a cause we had once dreamed about together. One evening, as I was leaving the office, I saw him waiting by my car. "I'm not here to ask for another chance," he said quickly. "I just wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For showing me what integrity looks like, for making me confront the truth about myself." For a moment, we stood in silence. Then I spoke. "Would you like to get coffee sometime?" "Just to talk." A small smile crossed his face. "I'd like that." 2 years later, Jessica remains in prison. Linda and Richard have relocated, and Turner Tech is a leader in both innovation and ethics. David and I have built something new, an honest friendship founded on mutual respect. Looking back, I realize the hardest battles aren't for money or power, but for dignity and self-worth. I won that battle by refusing to compromise my values. The sun sets over the city, casting golden light on the Turner Tech building. Tomorrow brings new challenges, but for now, I'm at peace. True wealth lies in integrity, courage, and the strength to stand tall, even when the world tries to pull you down. And that, I've learned, is priceless.
Hi, I'm Sharon and I'm 26 years old. When you reach this age, things start happening around you, just like they did for me. I was about to marry the most amazing man I had ever met. Craig was everything I ever wanted and more. We met on a boating trip. I was with some friends, and he was there for a business meeting in Maryland. I wouldn't call it love at first sight because it wasn't. In fact, during our relationship, we went through many phases before realizing we were meant for each other. My family adores Craig. My mom and dad treat him like their own son, and even the family dog gets more excited to see him than me. I met Craig's mom, Mayla, and his dad, Kevin, a few months after we decided to get married, and we all instantly got along. Mayla is the sweetest lady and reminds me of my mom, while Kevin is laid back and always making jokes. They're not always funny, but we laugh anyway. I was in love with Craig and his family, but this was before I met Natasha, Craig's older sister. One day during a family lunch, Mila mentioned Natasha. "So, your sister's coming to town next week. Are you two going to pick her up at the airport? I think this is a good time to introduce your fiancé to the other woman who helped raise you." Craig laughed while eating some toast. "Pulling my hair, eating half my food, and taking my toys, that's what I call raising me, Mom." The whole table laughed as we enjoyed our meal. After meeting Kevin, I started to see how Craig had picked up his dad's humor. Both of them could crack a good joke every now and then. I thought, well, now I have to wait a week until Craig says something really funny. Hey, it's all part of having a sibling, right? Speaking of which, Sharon, you have one. A sibling, I mean? Oh no, I'm an only child. I did have a few dogs and cats growing up though. Does that count? Of course. My kids scratched and screamed at each other growing up, so I'd say our experiences were the same, Kevin joked, and we all giggled. I felt so at ease around Craig's family, it was almost too comfortable, but thanks to Natasha, things were about to change. Natasha had moved to New York after college. Craig told me his sister could be a bit overprotective, but he said I shouldn't worry. He expected us to get along just as well as I had with the rest of the family. Craig is half Hungarian on his mom's side, but while he hadn't picked up much of the culture Natasha had, the family would try not to speak Hungarian around me because they knew I wouldn't understand. But what they didn't know is that I'm a linguist. While that doesn't mean I can learn languages instantly, it does help. Craig had taught me a few phrases, and I took the initiative to learn more on my own. There are so many websites to help with that these days, so now I can use Hungarian conversationally, though I plan to wait until I was more confident. When are you two getting married? Natasha asked in Hungarian as soon as we were in the car. Seriously, you just met her 5 minutes ago, and she's sitting right next to me. You already forgot her name? Come on, just tell me already. I'm not going to ask her. I could only understand bits and pieces of the conversation. Natasha's accent was different from Mayla's, probably because she was raised here. Sharon, Natasha's asking about the wedding. She wants to know the date so she can make arrangements at work. Oh, of course. We don't have a fixed date yet, but it's going to be in March, so 3 months from now. I think that's plenty of time for you to get a few days off from work beforehand. Don't worry. Oh, all right. That's a relief. I thought it would be much sooner. Why did she seem so relieved when the wedding was months away? Let's keep talking in English, yeah, Nat? We're still working on Sharon's Hungarian, so it's going to take a while. This is already tough. She whispered something in Hungarian before saying that, and this time I understood. I was feeling a bit intimidated by her. It wasn't going as smoothly as it had with his parents, but I reminded myself that not everyone likes you right away. I was sure we would get along with some effort. A few days passed, and I wasn't always at Craig's place, so our interactions were minimal. Whenever I did go there, Natasha would find an excuse to go out, whether it was shopping or going to the movies with friends. I could see the annoyance on Kevin and Mila's faces. One time when I showed up, Kevin said, "You better not be leaving us today, Nat. You've watched enough films for the week. Spend some time with Sharon and your brother this afternoon." Natasha rolled her eyes and said, "Oh my God, not this again. I've met her and we've talked. Do I really have to keep doing it? I don't want to get to know her. I already know enough people. She looks like every other girl. I've met her already, so I don't see the big deal. Natasha, English please. This is the 6th time this week." "Okay, I won't be gone long. I'll come back and spend plenty of time with both of you, I promise." "Sharon, oh, that's okay. I hope you do come back though. I'd really love to know more about you and your work and everything." "Me too. It's just that my friends keep making plans, and since I haven't been home in a while, they're being very stubborn. You must have friends, right? You understand. What if she doesn't? What if she wants you to stay but is too nice to say it?" "I thought we were speaking in English, ma. Seriously, what did I just say?" "It's okay, guys, don't stress about it because of me. I'm learning Hungarian anyway, so maybe you won't have to switch to English for me." "How lovely. Anyway, I'll be right back for lunch, or else Mama Bear here will fry me like a fish for dinner. Bye now, see you all soon." And then she left to hang out with her friends again. I found it interesting that she stayed in touch with her friends even after moving so far away. I guess they must have grown up together. I didn't expect her to keep her promise and join us for lunch, but to my surprise, she showed up right on time. She looked annoyed to be there. Like she'd much rather be with those friends she kept talking about. I guess she finally gave in. We talked about how their home had changed over the years and how Kevin's jokes had gotten a bit lamer. It was all fun. Then I decided to ask Natasha what she did in New York. "So Matt, what do you do in New York?" "I'm an interior designer. I've designed some of the best places out there. I keep asking these two oldies to let me redesign this old house, but they never listen. I was hoping you'd knock some sense into them. This is the house you grew up in. It's beautiful the way it is. Come on, Sharon, help me out here. I mean, those weird beige couches are killing me. I actually like it here. Those couches are comfortable too." Of course, she takes their side. She's just trying to be the good girl to get them to like her. Typical. You really have to stop talking about my fiancé like that. What's your problem, Matt? I have no problem. What are you talking about? Is everything okay? Did I say something wrong? Oh, of course you didn't, honey. We were just talking about how the house looks kind of ugly. It's just my opinion though. Your fiancé isn't very keen on it. Hey Nat, that reminds me, you didn't tell me what Rye was up to. Why isn't he joining us? Dad, I told you he was busy. He really wanted to come and see Sharon and Craig, but he couldn't find the time. He'll be free soon, and I'll drag him here the next time I come back. I think he prefers it here anyway. Oh, I'd love to meet him. When did you guys get married? Oh, it feels like ages ago, sweetie, but it was just 2 years back. I was designing his new home, and our eyes just met. We got married 6 months later. Wow, that's beautiful. Please bring him around next time. Yes, of course. Natasha just smiled brightly, and everyone went back to eating. It was pretty awkward after that. The conversation switched to other things like the wedding, the venues, the number of guests, and all that, but Natasha didn't show any interest in any of it. She just ate quietly. I wondered if their family dinners were always like this, but who am I kidding? I knew it was me. My Hungarian had improved enough to know that Natasha didn't really like me much. She thought I was just trying to impress Kevin and Mila so they'd like me. And don't get me wrong, I did want them to be happy with me, but I wasn't going to go out of my way to make that happen. My opinions were and always will be my own, but it seemed like Natasha had made up her mind about me the moment she met us at the airport. The more time I spent around her, the more I started catching unpleasant phrases in Hungarian. She would talk to her friend on the phone and say things like, "I don't know why my idiot brother is marrying this girl. What does he even see in her? She doesn't do or say anything interesting and she has no idea how to speak Hungarian." She'd have more frequent conversations on her phone when we were all together, like she always preferred talking to someone else. Sometimes her phone would ring late at night, and she'd be on the call for hours. I assumed it was her husband. She used her words like a sword so often that it pushed me to work even harder on my Hungarian. I felt like I needed to be less meek and stand up for myself a bit more. I wasn't going to just sit there and let Natasha insult me in her language whenever she felt like it, so I became determined. After spending a few days with us, Natasha went back to New York. During that time, I doubled my efforts to learn Hungarian. I was an assistant professor at the university, and even though my subject was linguistics, one of my colleagues, Jenna, was a master in many languages. Hungarian just happened to be one of them. I decided to meet her after hours and talk about my situation. So, as you know, my fiancé is half Hungarian, and like they say, Jenna, knowing someone's language is one step closer to knowing their heart. Not to be cheesy, but I've been trying hard to learn the language. I know a little now, but you're the master. Do you think you could help? Well, I suppose I could. Tell you what, buy me a sandwich for lunch, and I'll let you attend my elementary Hungarian classes for a while. It should be enough to help you catch on to the grammar. That sounds perfect. But you can't attend the whole semester since you're not a student. Attend a few initial classes with the new batch, and I'll help you in private later on. Also, I know you're doing this for your fiancé, sweetie, but are you sure about it? Hungarian is a difficult language to learn. Aren't all languages difficult? I think with enough determination, I can at least become a better conversationalist. A lot of effort also falls on you whenever I ask. Don't worry, I won't mind. Ask as often as you like. Thank you. Oh, I see someone's been working on it, huh? Impressive. Come on, let's go. I'm getting hungry. She laughed, and the two of us headed to the nearest cafeteria. Everything was going smoothly. I knew learning a foreign language was going to be tough, especially since I had to balance it with my work, family, and other commitments. But I was determined. I wanted to be part of this family, and learning the language was a big step toward that. Plus, getting back at Natasha a little bit would be worth it. The next week, I started attending Jenna's lectures. She was so good with the language that I could have mistaken her for a native speaker. Her accent was spot on. Since I wasn't going to get more than a month of learning, I made sure to take notes whenever possible. She would always check in with me after each lecture, and I don't think I could have found a better teacher. Meanwhile, Natasha returned a month later. By then, my Hungarian had improved a lot, but I kept it a secret from Craig and the rest of the family. I wanted to surprise everyone by joining in on a conversation out of nowhere, but something happened that stopped me in my tracks. "Hello, darling. Oh, how I've missed you. I know the last time wasn't long enough, but here we are again." "What do you mean I'll disappear again?" "I'll come back to you in no time, I promise." Natasha was on the phone again. The family was outside for a barbecue dinner. The three of them were setting the table and firing up the grill, while I had gone inside to get some plates and other things. "I already told you I'm here to attend my brother's stupid wedding. He's getting married to this boring-looking high school teacher or something. I don't even know why. But forget about them, this is all about us. Do you even know how much I love you? If it wasn't for constantly moving around, I'd never leave your side." Oh boy, it seemed like she really missed her husband Rye. I felt a little bad for eavesdropping, so I quickly grabbed the plates and slipped away. But I was glad that I was able to understand almost everything she was saying, even with her unique accent. We set up the table, and the food was quickly prepared. There's nothing like a hot, delicious dinner for everyone to enjoy. "So, have you been busy with all day, Nat? Rye misses you that much?" "Of course he does, Dad. He's my husband," she replied as soon as we sat down to eat. "Oh, I was wondering, does Rye speak Hungarian too? You must have taught him." "Oh, I wish, darling. He's a bit dense and already speaks 2 languages. I think his head is rather full at this point to overload it. Yeah, that guy. Smarter than anyone in the room but doesn't get a single word of Hungarian. It's so odd, but it's okay. We don't force it on anyone. Wait a second, if Ray doesn't speak a word of Hungarian, then who was Natasha talking to? I let the thought sink in. I knew I had to dig a bit deeper before jumping to conclusions. So I asked, is Ray going to join us anytime soon? Didn't you say you'd bring him home this time? No, unfortunately, he's left the country for a while for some business in Texas, but he said he'll try to swing by on his way to New York. Nat, the wedding is next week. I don't know about you, but I need him to be here. That's an order from the father of the bride. Chill out, Dad. He'll be here, I promise. Okay, fine, he better be. At that moment, I felt like showing off my Hungarian skills, but I kept quiet. Ray was away on a business trip, and Natasha rarely spent time with us whenever she was home. She was always talking to someone in perfect Hungarian. Something didn't feel right about the whole situation. After all, where did she go all the time? Surely her friends had work to do, so who was she spending so much time with? I needed to dig a bit deeper. A few days passed, and Natasha's behavior became more aggressive. My mother-in-law and I were going dress shopping with some friends. Natasha looked uninterested, but Mila dragged her along anyway. I wasn't too keen on having her there, but I couldn't say no to my mother-in-law. We found the perfect white dress, which felt just right for the wedding. I still remember what Natasha mumbled when I tried it on. There's no way I've been dragged all the way here just for this woman to pick that dress. It's completely classless and not even worth pennies. Sorry, what was that, Nat? I didn't quite catch you. I said it looks so beautiful on you, I could cry. It reminded me of my wedding. Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you. Oh, someone's been practicing. 2 words and you're proud? It'll take you 2 years to make a sentence at this pace. I just smiled at her as if I didn't know what she was saying. The days kept rolling by, and the wedding day was getting closer. One day, I was cleaning up at home by myself. Kevin and Craig had gone out to buy something, and we ladies were alone in the house. Natasha had just received a package from someone. It looked like a gift. I was cleaning around anyway, so I decided to walk over to the hall right outside her room. She was already on the phone, screaming in excitement. Oh my God, you didn't? This dress is so pretty, and you remembered my size and my colors, Sergio. My dense husband could never. Wait, who's Sergio? Is Natasha having an affair? I didn't want to think about this possibility. In fact, I hoped my suspicions were wrong, but the more I heard her talk, the more real it became for me. I won't go into all the details, but it seemed like they met right here, years before she got married. Poor Ray has no idea, does he? Even the family seems clueless. However, I didn't expect to let it all out so easily when she spoke up about me at my wedding. The day arrived and the ceremony gave me butterflies. Craig and I were finally united, but it was the after party that was the highlight of the evening. Natasha had invited her friends over, and some of the family's cousins were there too. Ray had flown in from Texas for the wedding, and he seemed like a great guy, but Natasha barely paid any attention to him. She looked like she had something to drink because she was louder than usual, laughing and giving me bold looks. I couldn't hear what she was saying because this was my moment. I didn't want to pay attention to her, but then it happened. She said something like, "I'm so done with this whole wedding. Honestly, I'm just here to drink and look prettier than the bride. I give this marriage tops a year before my brother gets bored of her, like a dog with a dirty bone. Mark my words." And that was it. Something inside me snapped. When everyone was at the table, I lifted a glass and tapped it with a spoon to make a toast. That's when I let out all the Hungarian I'd practiced for so long. Even Jenna was at the table, and I knew I had to impress her. So, as you all know, I've been practicing my Hungarian for a while now. Today, I can proudly give a speech without stumbling, all thanks to my teacher Jenna. Thank you, Jenna. But today isn't about you or me, it's about Craig and his family. I've loved everyone so much. Mila, Kevin, oh, and my dear Natasha. I thought Natasha was the perfect sister to my Craig, but you know, maybe that's why I was so disappointed in her. Disappointed? Can you speak in English so we all understand, please? Oh, I'm sure Natasha will fill you in, Ray. Anyway, a few weeks have passed now, and I can't keep this in anymore. Nat, I'm so sorry for you and Ray, but whatever you've been through, I don't think cheating on such a good man is the right thing to do. Could you please put down that glass and tell everyone who Sergio is? Natasha's jaw dropped, her eyes wide open as the blood drained from her face. She stuttered as she tried to speak. What are you talking about, you insane woman? I'm sorry, is it too difficult for you to get in Hungarian with all the wine you've had today? Let me put it simply, Sergio. He's your secret lover, isn't he, Nat? He gave you that beautiful dress you've been talking about on the phone all this time. Honey, what is going on right now? Ask your sister. She's the one who's been cheating on Ray for so long. How long exactly, Nat? Care to tell us in either of the two languages? The whole dinner table fell silent. Natasha was getting all sorts of looks from everyone. Ray looked like he was in complete disbelief. It was as if someone had dropped a bomb in the middle of the room. Is this true? Ray asked. Natasha didn't say a word. Tears began rolling down her face as she slammed her glass on the table and ran off. Ray just sat there, shell-shocked by everything. The table was silent for a while until I announced it was time to hit the dance floor. Soon, everyone decided to deal with the awkwardness later and danced a few steps with their partners and dates. Rai and Natasha disappeared from the wedding. A few months later, their divorce came through quite unexpectedly. I never heard from Natasha again, and she never came back home. Mila and Kevin were quite disappointed in her for what she did, and it was awkward between us for a while. But they appreciated that I exposed her sooner rather than later. Either way, that look of sheer fright and anguish on her face was worth it. I don't think she'll ever find a man as good as Rai again. Good riddance to her for sure.
Oh, I had assumed that Mom had a ton of. I told you I had money saved up, didn't I? Her out by now. What's the use of allowing the unemployed parasite to remain here? Since moving here 3 months ago, my savings were washed out by my son and his spouse. I was done with them treating me like a mate. With everything, so I quickly and silently went. I was phoned by my son. Mom, what's up? Tony seemed desperate when he spoke on the phone. Then something I had done had turned into headlines from around the country. My name is Sarah, and I'm 70 years old. Been residing in France for a while. However, things got worse with my heel, so I returned to my native United States. Unit was vacant, so I contacted to see if I might help my son and his wife remain with them temporarily. Tony, my only 44-year-old lone son, works in an office. Employee, neither he nor his spouse Alice do have children, and they appear to depart silently. While I was away, we lost contact, but I opted to get back in touch, and Tony appeared to happy to hear from me. I have described my situation and requested permission to remain for. Tony hesitantly admitted after a while that it was uncomfortable to force upon them, yet the joint. Seeing my family again brought me more joy than my hesitations, laced with a hint of anxiety. And joy, I rode in a taxi from the airport to their residence upon my arrival. Alice and Tony welcomed me to the Tony appeared content as Alice made her arrival. Was clearly upset, and I intend to stay here. For some months, my possessions will be delivered later. With my carry-on luggage, I headed to the living room. We spoke about our everyday lives and employment in addition to my most recent French life. Tony inquired as to why I had relocated to. I mentioned earlier that I'm getting older in France. Wish to take in the French countryside scenery. Tommy chuckled, but Alice didn't change. Then we spoke about my health problems. Experiencing extreme lightheadedness, and was the minor's illness can be the cause of a seizure happens. Folks might not be able to stand as a result of the surroundings being spinning and possibly experiencing nausea. Felt uneasy being by myself, thus I desired to remain with them till my circumstances stabilizes. Following a discussion, I had returned to the entryway to retrieve my items from my carry-on. While I was arranging my belongings in the hallway, overheard Alice and Tony talking. Are you really going to let Sarah go, Tony? Staying puts me against living with an elderly. Come on, woman, you are too, she's my mom. Part-time, so you won't necessarily certainly be present. But what about our days? I want to know how long she plans to stay off. Her gone, don't speak that way, Mother will. When you finally depart, we can talk about money. Just keep it quiet tomorrow. She might hear you, but she's too elderly to listen to us. Bring keen ears to detect slights. And their IEES dropped out of the discussion in, I apologize for imposing in the chilly hallway. Tommy and his spouse, so all of a sudden I'm. Yes, it's a major hassle for them. However, you should know that I'm pretty content right now. Chatting with Tony and his spouse. Following the years spent apart, when Tony was small, I was a single mother raising him. Following the death of my husband, Tony experienced his fair share of hardships. Coping with disease and everything isn't making up for it. But I was hoping to attend here to express my thanks and regrets. I came to this residence for that reason. It's a regret that I'm not welcome, but they have to live their own lives. Therefore, I visited that I tried to relax into the guest room they gave me. Next morning, Tony departed from my troubled heart. For work, and Alice and I were alone. As I was working on some crafts on the sofa, Alice was in the living room in front of me. Hey Sarah, please stop creating such a mess. Glancing around, I saw remnants of cloth and haphazardly placed threads. I'm sorry. Do you know what this is that I cleaned it up? I showed her the little bag I was making. On it, I had a small green turtle design. This is a turtle-themed purse. I adore turtles. I create small crabs with a turtle motif. Even features a zipper on its exterior. That's good, but Sarah, just relax. During the day, Alice interrupted me. Clearly bored inside, looking very much at. When I'm off, at least go somewhere else. You're obstructing me from my part-time work. But if I go outside too, I get lightheaded. Much, I'll take you to the adjacent community center to remain there throughout the day, and I have household responsibilities. Without allowing for further discussion, Alice stated. He kept on helping out with the responsibilities. You're not be reading while you're here. The least you can do given that we're permitting you to stay, do some instead of crafts. Laundry and cleaning eventually astounded me. Murmured, all right, and then gently stood up. From then on, I completed all day. Even though I was woozy and hurt, I took on the housework. Tony and Alice handled me. Alice appeared more like a housekeeper. Addicted to social media all the time. It appeared from her phone that she hadn't been completing the housework before I. Did you bring your mother with you that night? Upon Tony's arrival at home, his banking card spoke to me with a smile that I don't. Although you live with us, living is expensive. Could you add something? I glanced over at Tony. I nodded at my reading glasses and got up. Took my handmade banking card out. Pouch and gave it to Tony, who he examined. Quickly, his expression stiffened as he waited. Mom, have you saved anything else but this? Accounts are all I have. They are unnecessary. A great deal at my age, no chronic diseases, or whatever I stated while grinning as the talk went on, and Tony's expression. This is not enough money, darkish man. Not even 10,000, as you claim to be alive. Huge overseas. So I thought Tony maintained asking persistently whether I had any more money, so I said no, and he sighed. Shrugged his shoulders. Okay, I'll wait. For the time being, I'm giving you a kindly allow you to reside here, since this is the very least that you could do following my bank account password was taken by Tony, and debit cards, departing from the space that as I lay in bed at night, I could hear Tony tooting through the dividing wall. Our rooms, what a disappointment. Completely believed that Mom was wealthy. Actually, the household is losing money. I should not have allowed her to stay and see me. Told you to get rid of her already. Unemployed moocher does not benefit us. Regardless of how the two of them seemed. Sure, I couldn't hear people speaking openly in the adjacent room, or perhaps they desired me. I was listening to them in my chilly bed, keeping back lonely tears and sadness. The following day, due to Alice's day off, she took me to the neighborhood center. I unzipped my duffel bag. to keep up my maintenance in the living room, but discovered I was no longer in the necessary cloth at home, so I was hesitant, but I was unable to beg Alice to return and retrieve. Thankfully, my discomfort was under control today. I was familiar with this region, so I opted to stroll home in order to obtain when the fabric did arrive. I looked via the veranda into Alice's home, and an unknown male were present at. I initially believed him to be a guest, but they appeared very close, so I hesitated. Ate outside for a little before returning without going into the residence, which is why they want my departure, so that I wouldn't reopen the affair. While in the community center, my thoughts kept concerning Alice and those men and chose to call someone for guidance going forward. Refrained from discussing the men and kept communicating with Tony and his wife. But every time I went out of the house residence, I would boldly display a crimson turtle pouch on the brink of existence, room side table after 3 months, ever since I moved in with Tony's. By now, my family had become the homes built during my time there. I had a ton of things to perform at home, and when Alice was at home, so I was put in the community center. The majority of my savings had tired of Tony, a man with addicted to gambling and spent the most of his spare time to play the lotto, and slots seemed to be his obsession with money. Originated from the financial difficulties he's suffering as a child. I first made an attempt to act, but ultimately obtained. Bringing it up always made him 3 months later, I was at my breaking point. Before a lengthy weekend one evening, I chose to bring a piece of equipment I had been taking Tony Alice into consideration. I appreciate that you, Tony, please let me stay with you. I know I made your life difficult when you were. Sorry, I was young and didn't have much money. For all the hassle I've brought about, but I'm with gratitude. I took out a handmade turtle bag from the table. It had a green color and this shell zipper serves as a reminder of, I hope you will both feel my thanks. You'll like to take it in defiance of neither Alice nor Tony had any expectations, expressed any curiosity about my artisanal pouch. Mom, have we really reached our limit? Consider the French account when you have money. I informed you, Tony, that we are out of luck. I put a lot of effort into this. Please accept it as a symbol of my love. Keep in mind how joyful you were when you were little. I used to feel the shell with some chocolates and small cash. Tony begins to become more displeased. I'm not a child anymore. Pleased to get such a thing. Sarah, for how long are you planning to stay? To genuinely swindle us. It annoys us. Tony and his spouse cast me in a chilly light. I frantically begged Tony, do you remember? Joe was the one who helped us in that old. We resided in an apartment that I don't recall to quit bringing up the past. Are we done being silently stunned? I tightened my grip on the turtle pouch and examined the papers feel inside the tomorrow. Tony and his spouse embark on a holiday leaving me behind, as I had anticipated, leaving the house following yesterday's talk, so I hurriedly packed my luggage with the designated courier and dispatched them, going for my French home. I also do not forget to insert the red turtle pouch. My carry-on bag. I jot down a brief note that thank you, and depart from the table, the residence where I had spent 3 months later. I never went back home. Instead, I remained in the United States hotel for a little since I had tasks to complete, and Tony and his spouse seemed to get in touch with me. Eventually, true enough, after roughly 2 weeks, Tony calls Mom later. Let's head to the turtle pouch. Isn't that yours? Tony yells into the phone, hearing his words. You saw that I wasn't shocked when I observed the turtle incident on the news. Bag that I intended to present to Tony and his wife found a $1 check inside. Million was my method of expressing gratitude for all of their actions and to express regret for all the mischief I made when I was younger. Some may consider it superficial to a ton with cash, but I had imagined the day I may gift it to them after modestly storing enough. I did some excavating a little over 40 years ago. prior to finally running into Tony and discovered that he owed money. Attempted to settle bills from gambling with additional gaming only to find himself descending further. He had a reliable employment. I just desired that he pay off his debts, and they were unwilling to go in peace, though. Acknowledge my gesture fully, forgotten about their generosity shown to me and my family. Thus I made the decision to split $1 million in checks, modest amounts, and made charitable donations and welfare associations worldwide. America, where I put the gifts, created a turtle bag by hand and delivered it. The turtle pouch became an anonymous sensation, trending and generating headlines. A social media user named Alice. That's the turtle pouch, mommy, mate, right? That implies you intended to give us one. Rich as well, yep, just that was my means of expressing gratitude to you, and I apologize for creating both the pocket and putting the cash aside to donate to. You could have, in fact, claimed that we would have accepted if you had not wanted to. If you don't need my money, then my sentiments. Tony was either shouting into the phone. Utterly insane, how much is that? Would you dare trick me and return it? Became inattentive and removed the phone away from my ear in a little amount of time, said, all right, relax, you're offering. There's another turtle, and I have a headache. And it's yours if you truly desire it. Tony at last calmed down and restated his craving for the turtle that we decided to meet in a cafe afterwards on the day I went. The final red turtle within a package to Tony and his spouse met where we'd already present and made a money demand prior to my actually sitting down when Tony silently removed the red turtle. Grabbed it right away, unzipping. It's not a check, but rather a little shell. Electrical gadget. What the devil is this? Tony tinkled with the unclear gadget. He discovered a small button, and when Ellie pressed it, a voice started to play. Standing beside Tony right away, Alter Hugh, seated close to Tony Alice's face, altered upon hearing a speech recording. It was Alice's voice, cordially speaking with something about another man who wasn't Tony. This explains why Alice's situation appeared to ultimately understand that it was a video showing her having an affair at. She attempted to steal the recorder at home from Tony's palm, although Tony clung to it. As they struggled, unlocked it. I brought an envelope and spread it out numerous photographs of Alice on the table. Cheating at home on another man provided with unquestionable proof. Alice became agitated and asked Ming why. Why did Tony pick up each picture individually? Analyzing them carefully ever since I arrived at things felt strange about your home. A buddy suggested that I hire a detective to find out and even made the offer to pay for them. What's the issue, and why would you do it? It's sad that you are my son's wife. To believe relatives are lying to one another. When you're older, you will comprehend. I suppose fate brought me here to learn. Alice, have you been unfaithful to me? I've been with you ever since Tony got your personal secrets. If you're placing the blame for cheating on her, you should fuck off. What about the fact that I have never cheated? Tony, your debt fell silent, and it's now. When it was Alice's turn to talk, how about you? Throwing away all of your cash on gambling. Just make use of the funds you and I have. Your part-time work, thus you ought to. Some cash while taking in their squabble. This pair had managed to get their eyesight to maintain its unity up until this point. Neither of Tony. Do you have any money? You have $40,000. Dead Alice, you've dedicated all of your profits to your partner in affairs that I had. The investigator also looks into your financial situation. Tony and Alice were both taken aback, and they started yelling at one another, and I was stunned when I initially heard the inquiry findings show that this pair was on the verge of bankruptcy. But we can make it. Return the money if we get Mum's funds. Now give it to us. I've given all that's left is this red money. Turtle statue, which he destroyed in my recall what happened to savings and gambling. You're not serious about all that in range. Tony sprang across the table at me. Other clients began to focus. And the employees rushed past the $1 million is mine. It was intended for me to give it back quickly. The cops needed to be summoned to hold Tony until the police spoke some common reason to him. They graciously took me back to my hotel because of my worries regarding Tony's combative conduct. 1 week later, Tony and Annalie, the partnership has declined repair as a result of their financial situation. Obtained. Tony, a divorced man, is now even more single. Engrossed in gaming a scene more than he was discovered attempting to steal company funds. He was spared from prosecution, but was let go, which worsened his anger at the cafe. Was recorded on producing a video and sharing it on social media. He has trouble finding another work. Unable to take the disgrace, Tony disconnected every interaction and vanished following Alice's divorce, moved into an ancient house with no one to rely on, living alone in a public housing unit. Prior to my being able to donate to the turtle rescue is visible in my blog post. Ridiculing my own turtle became widely known. Alice began to experience intimidation and sexting. It ultimately extended to her part-time. Even the man she worked with and got her fired was involved in an affair and became weary of her and now departed without a paycheck. She is receiving temporary support for dependent. Following that, I went back to my family's. Once I'd finished unpacking, back home in France, I put on a dress in my apartment. The ease of practice while I was going over certain work pages where I heard a sound. The entrance appeared to be Joe, my roommate. Had arrived back home, Madame President. Hello again, and how was your journey? After a long absence, Joe arrived in America with grinning. He puts down his luggage and coat. Joe, who is 75 years old, lived in the same residential building where my son lives. Tony and I used to live together years ago. Was battling poverty after losing my spouse and taking care of a young Tony, asthmatic. We were without utilities and without anybody to ask for help. I was desperate and thought of giving up on everything. Joe and his spouse were upstairs. Our neighbors were the ones who saved us. Lifelines, give me a ring. I'm back, Sarah. And see, I brought a ton of, wow, all of my faith mementos, thank you. I'll bring a few to the storytelling gathering. Joe, see you tomorrow at the community center? Looked over each of the accumulated mementos. His happy expression on the table after we, having regained our footing, Joe and his, years after the wife moved away for employment, we encountered one another in the city, and I started assisting with a program of support for the poor, on whom Joe had established. Joe's wife had already died by then, so we began collaborating as a company life partners. I have been in charge of the structure after Joe left a few years ago. Years back, what was once a tiny Joe and M's venture has developed into an extensive international organization. In the last 30 years, we've been concentrating on assisting lone mods in racing a few years before moving to France. Passed to examine their advanced assistance systems, even though we gain a lot of recognition. In France, our reach is still limited. Acknowledged in America, I intend to grow our plans there shortly and desire to invest time in Tony's family as only a mother before they learned about my work. In the end, I was unable to obtain them to comprehend my feelings, but that's their decision, even if it was just temporary. I was content to act as if for a family even though I'm 70 years old today. Even at 70, I still have a lot of wants, and I have to strengthen my back in order to attire and started considering my worldwide speech in support of. Next day.
Hey everyone, I'm Yasmin and I want to share a story that sheds light on my incredibly entitled and eccentric mother-in-law, Jessica. My husband Kai suggested sharing this tale because he enjoys reading them from time to time. Before you find it odd, let me clarify that he's well aware of his mother's eccentricities, having been her first victim. Kai's upbringing involved Jessica, who divorced his father shortly after his birth. He experienced her craziness firsthand and distanced himself as much as possible. Unfortunately, Jessica's poor taste in men persisted, leading to another abandonment by Kai's father. While Kai's father paid child support initially, he later terminated his rights. I've never met the man and have no desire to. Claiming to have single-handedly raised Kay, Jessica exploited him to extract money from her family for an extended period. When they grew weary of supporting her, she found a job but continued to siphon money from Kay. During his teenage years, Jessica coerced him into working, all the while pocketing his earnings until he turned 18. Recognizing the need to break free, Kay took out student loans and secured a scholarship for college. That's where we crossed paths. Kay shared the harrowing stories of his mother's behavior, and I couldn't help but be furious on his behalf. I questioned how he could still be in contact with her. He explained, "I was raised by a narcissist. She conditioned me to believe that taking care of her is my responsibility." Distressed by Kay's situation, I used my savings to kickstart his therapy. Although initially resistant, Kay eventually embraced the process, gaining confidence and slowly standing up to his manipulative mother. Recognizing the positive changes, I continued supporting him. Unsurprisingly, Jessica never liked me. During our first meeting, she accused me of being a gold digger who poisoned her son against her. I defended myself, highlighting that I used my money to help Kay access therapy. Over the years, Kay and I graduated, got married, and secured good jobs. Despite working hard for our success, Jessica persisted in her financial demands. She eventually got married to a disrespectful man named Frank, and Kay reluctantly agreed to rent her an apartment. When we bought a house, she expressed her satisfaction, stating, "Heave, I'm so happy that you finally bought a house. I was getting tired of living in an apartment." "So when can Frank and I move in?" "Excuse me, what are you talking about?" "Well, I'll be moving into your house with Frank. That's what I'm saying. Why should I live in an apartment when you are housing your wife for free?" "Jessica, we both bought this jointly. I literally co-own this place with Kay. I don't live here for free. You are the one who lives in the apartment for free since Kay pays the rent." "Watch your mouth, Jasmine. I don't tolerate disrespect from anyone. I'm talking to my son about his house. I didn't ask you anything. I have the right to talk since it's also my house you are talking about. You're not staying with us, and neither is Frank. That's for my son to decide, and he knows that it's his responsibility to take care of me." "I'm already taking care of you, Mom. You don't get to move into my house to raise me. That's not how it works, and there is no chance of an argument, so don't even try." "You're acting like an entitled brat, Keith. Your mom worked hard to raise you, and you need to take some responsibility for her. Now, be a good son and give us a copy of your keys so that we can move in." "You don't get to say what I do with my house keys, Frank. Neither of you is even getting a copy of our keys. I'll say this for the last time, you two will not be moving into our house. That's it." You would think that's the end of it. Well, it isn't. For days, Frank and Jessica kept harassing us and guilting us. Jessica even said some horrible things to me because she thought I was manipulating Keith and making him abandon her. It was funny at first, but soon we got fed up. One day, Kay went to their apartment to drive it into their heads that they wouldn't be moving in. We thought our point got across since we stopped hearing from them. Problem solved. Well, not quite. A month after we moved into our house, we had a small vacation coming up. After saving for years, we finally decided to go on a break to celebrate our house purchase. It was supposed to be a relaxing vacation for the two of us by the beach. We both took time off and decided to take things easy for that week. We flew there and had a blast from the first day itself. But as evening came, something shocking happened. I got a notification from the Ring camera on my house's door. Yes, we did set up surveillance cameras before we went on vacation since we didn't ask anyone to house sit. We thought that it would be important. Now, I had no idea who would even show up at the door. The neighborhood is pretty safe, and we have lived there before. Hardly anything ever happened there, so I was curious why there was so much activity at the house. I opened my phone to see what the hell was going on there. What I found in the live camera footage shocked me. There I saw my dear mother-in-law Jessica and her new husband Frank moving into our freaking home. Yes, they somehow got into our house and brought 12 bags of clothes. Literally 12 freaking bags. They were moving into the guest room and setting up everything there. Jessica even went into the kitchen to make herself some food. I was shocked and angry at what I was witnessing. I knew that I needed to tell Keith immediately. So I called him over and said, "Keith, I have some news. I think we need to talk about it right now. Right now." "What's so important, Yasmin? We're on vacation. I'm kind of not in the mood for any serious stuff today." "Trust me, Keith, I'm not in the mood to deal with horrible people either. But this situation is dire and needs our immediate attention. I'm afraid it's about your mother. Mom's making trouble again." "Oh God, what is it this time? Did she manage to break into our house or something?" From the look I gave Keith, it became apparent to him that he wasn't off the mark. His eyes immediately turned into saucers as he tried to make sense of the situation. I pulled out my phone and showed him what Jessica and Frank were doing. He was shocked and looked very angry at what he was seeing. I mean, his joke turned out to be the truth. His mom broke into our new house and was moving in furniture with her husband. Keith looked a little pissed off and said, "You can leave it to my mother to surprise me in the worst way possible." Looks like she didn't take the hint at all. We made it clear that day that she won't be living with us. I'm even surprised as to how she got the keys to our house. It just blows my mind. Her new husband is a sleazy guy, Yasmin. We both know that. I'm afraid he may have gotten his hands on our keys and made a copy. I wouldn't put it past him. We will need to go back and change the locks. That's the only way we can make sure that they don't budge into our house anytime they like. But what do we do about this current problem? Do you have something in mind? Look, I know they are your parents and all, but I really want to call the cops on them. What they are doing is illegal and downright scary. They can't be trusted anymore. Either calling the cops and getting no contact with them is the best solution possible. I gave Keith some time to turn the idea in his head. I could see that he was thinking hard and had grim lines on his forehead, but it didn't take too long for him to come back with a response, and his response was way better than I imagined. He said, "You know what, Yasmin? Let's do it." "What? Are you sure about that? There'll be no going back once we do this, and the cops will drag your mom and Frank to the streets with all their things." "I know that, Yasmin. I've given them enough chances to improve themselves. They just betrayed my trust every time. I have to stop somewhere. There has to be some consequences. What they did today is not only a breach of our privacy but also illegal. I think it's time they realize they can't do whatever they want. Would you go no contact with them as well?" Of course, my reluctance to do that has already created a lot of problems. I should have done this a long time ago. I'm freaking stupid and thought Mom would grow some sense after I got married. Since that's not happening, I'm going to distance myself from them. It's the only way, and I am actually feeling good about it. Okay then, if you're on board with it, let's proceed with that plan. But first, let's call your mom and give her a warning. Just a final chance to make this right. I don't have any hope, but we can get evidence that we didn't allow her in our house. Keith agreed with the plan and called his mother. She didn't pick up the first time through the security cameras. I could see that she was visibly annoyed and went to Frank. They discussed something before answering the call. When we rang the second time, she put the phone on loudspeaker so that Frank could join in as well. She said, "Hey Keith, how are you doing? Is the vacation going fine? You need to tell me what's going on over there." "I don't know what you're talking about. Everything is just breezy here. Nothing to worry about really." "Jessica, you and Frank breaking into our house is nothing to worry about." Jessica went quiet when I said that. On the security tapes, we could see that she tensed and looked at Frank again. I mean, Frank was better at fooling and manipulating people, so this was expected. Jessica wanted her new husband to come up with some plan. "What are you even talking about, Yasmin? Kay, your wife has gone crazy. You need to shut her up." "Don't talk to my wife like that. We know what you two are up to. With cameras in the house, both inside and out, there's no point in lying to us. We can see you on our phones right now." "Wait, what? How dare you spy on us, Keith? This is unacceptable. What about our privacy? You should have been more thoughtful." It was ironic how Jessica was offended by the fact that we could see their activities on our screen. She talks about respecting people's privacy when she broke into someone's house and made it her own. I didn't know if Jessica was trying to deflect or if she was genuinely offended. I have a good guess that it's a little bit of both. Her words sparked something in me, and I said, "That's rich coming from you, Jessica. You are the one who broke into our private home when we clearly told you that you are not allowed in." "I don't care what you say, Yasmin. It's my son's house too, so I have the right to be here. I'm his mother and should be staying with him." "I already said no to that, Mom. Just because you're my mother doesn't mean you will go wherever I go. You already have an apartment that I pay for. Who wants to live in that tiny apartment when you have brought such a big house?" "You're turning into such a selfish man after getting married, Keith. This is unacceptable. You can't expect your own mother to live in an apartment while you enjoy a whole house with your wife. That decision is not up to you, Mom. You shouldn't have just packed up your stuff and moved into the house. How did you even get the keys?" Both me and Kay were troubled by this question and needed answers immediately. Also, we needed them to confess to their wrongs so that we could use that to report them to the police. And our hunch was right. Frank said, "Well, since you decided to be a brat and ignore your mother, I went and made a copy of your keys." "Who the hell told you to touch my keys? I didn't give you permission to do that." "I don't need your permission, Kai. I'm your stepdad. I have the authority to do what I think is right. You don't get to question me." "I don't care who you are to me, Frank. I'm a grown-ass man and don't need a parent. What you did was forgery, and both are offenses under the law. Kai, how dare you talk to Frank like that? He only did this because he knew I was sad. A mother should have the keys to her son's house for emergencies and all, you know? For emergencies and breaking in whenever you want? You're insane, Jessica. You need to get off our property with all your stuff within an hour. If you don't, we will call the cops. That made Jessica and Frank look frightened. They visibly panicked and whispered something amongst themselves. Their panic was clear on their faces, and we could see that through the cameras. In the end, they said, "Don't threaten us, woman. This is not your house. This is my son's house. Only he gets to make those decisions. This house belongs to both Yasmin and me, and we both want you to get out before I'm forced to call the cops." Trust me, Mom, that will be ugly. What an ungrateful brat you are, Kate. How can you threaten to kick out your mom? She was given a warning and didn't listen. Now both of you will be facing consequences. You have exactly 1 hour to vacate my house before I call the cops. Remember that I have you on surveillance and I will know what you are doing. Frank and Jessica started to yell at us when we hung up. We didn't want to go into an argument with them anymore. Their entitled brains were not meant to participate in conversations or healthy discussions. They didn't care about anything but themselves. We gave them 1 hour while we put all the proof into a folder. Through the cameras, we could see that they were having a discussion but didn't budge. Instead, Jessica started to unpack her bags. That made us both angry as hell. As the hour passed, we called the police with all the evidence we had. Thankfully, they took us seriously and went to our house. We saw the whole fiasco unfold in front of our house. The cops went there and knocked at the door. Jessica and Frank opened the door and immediately faked being confused. After the officers told them everything, they called us and sang a different tune. They said, "Kay, why was there a need to call the cops? We just want to live with our son. Why are you making things so difficult? Tell the cops that this was all a misunderstanding." "I don't want you living with me, Mom. I said that 100 times now. Stop being so freaking entitled. Leave before the cops arrest you and we are forced to press charges." "Kay, don't do this. Please look, we have nowhere to go. You need to let us stay here. Just tell the cops to leave. We will have a calm discussion about this once you come back." "Absolutely not, Mom. You need to back up and go to your apartment. I want my house empty today and right now, Keith. Actually, we can't go back to the apartment. I canceled the lease and sold my furniture. We really have nowhere to go. I thought that she wouldn't mind living with us, so I canceled the lease myself." The audacity of this woman shocked me to the core. She canceled her lease because she thought she could force us to house her. She was freaking insane. Heath was boiling with rage and ready to scream at her sorry ass. He said, "You went behind my back and canceled your lease? What the freaking hell, Mom? You know what? That's not my problem. I don't care where you go. You need to vacate my house." No, Keith. Please listen to me. I've nowhere to go. Don't kick us out. I'm your mother. Do you want your mother to be homeless? You made yourself homeless, Mom, since you don't want to stay in a rented apartment anymore. I won't give you rent money anymore. I'm freaking done. You can take your new man and figure out something for yourself. Get out of my house and don't try to contact me again. At this point, Jessica was literally crying and begging to make us hear her out. She even cried to me and brought up my dead mother to guilt me. They had the very opposite reaction than what she expected. Me and Key got so mad that we shouted at them and hung up. We immediately blocked the numbers because they crossed all our boundaries in one day and somehow made things worse than ever. The cops stayed back at the house and made sure that Jessica and Frank left. I called a mutual friend to help house it until we came back. She also assured me that she would call a locksmith to change our door lock the next day. She's a friend from college, and we trust her a lot. We knew that she would make sure our house was safe. She lived in an apartment, so it was easy for her to come to the house. Frank and Jessica left and went to God knows where. My guess is they spent the night at the hotel and bought new phone numbers to harass us. It didn't work. No relative took their side either because they knew Jessica well enough, and they didn't want to be in her drama. Also, they told her in no uncertain terms that they wouldn't house or help her out in any way. That made Jessica focus her attention back on us. For the rest of our vacation, we kept our phones switched off. We opened our phones once daily to check for emergencies, and that's it. We also only called our friend to make sure everything was all right. Yes, Jessica and Frank did show up again and tried to get in. They left after the friend threatened to call the cops again. We are thinking of sending a cease and desist letter before they escalate their behavior. Thankfully, they didn't want to know why. When we got back from vacation, we found out that Frank had decided to leave Jessica. Why, you may ask? Because she couldn't house and feed him for free anymore. Jessica was devastated and begged her son to talk to her. She finally realized that she needed her son for money. He didn't soften at all. He stuck to the no-contact decision that is still in place today. The last we know from family is that Jessica rented a trailer and still works at the retail store with no hope of retirement in sight.
I find myself entangled in a rather perplexing situation as I consider approaching your father regarding a troubling incident related to a potential mugging of my own father. Indeed, suspicions have arisen concerning your father's involvement in this alleged mugging. Currently, he is situated at home. Would you be open to allowing me a brief audience with him for an inquiry? The police officer displayed a momentary sense of bewilderment in response to my request, his expression betraying a subtle confusion. Despite this, he eventually agreed, stating, "Please, let me see him." Consequently, I led the police officer into the confines of my home, unlocking the door to reveal my father's presence. Upon beholding my father, the police officer was visibly taken aback by the unexpected revelation. This incident transpired a few months ago, and as I reflect upon it, I feel compelled to share a bit more about myself. My name is David, and I am currently a fourth-year university student. Despite my aspirations to work for a prominent company, there lingers an unresolved dilemma within me. The decision revolves around whether or not to inherit my father's company. You see, my father holds the esteemed position of president at a modest factory. During my formative years, I harbored a desire to follow in my father's footsteps, aspiring to become a president like him. However, as I entered my rebellious phase, I distanced myself from this ambition, feeling a sense of embarrassment towards my father perpetually adorned in work clothes stained with oil. This sentiment persisted through my teenage years, and to some extent, endures even now. As I matured into adulthood and engaged in part-time employment, my perspective on my father began to shift. I developed a newfound respect for his tireless work ethic, which sustained not only our family but also supported numerous employees and their families. Yet despite this growing admiration, an underlying sentiment lingered. A perception that the conventional salaryman, donned in a suit and toiling diligently, possessed a certain allure absent in my father's occupation. The narrative takes an intriguing turn when, during a shopping excursion with my father, we were unexpectedly hailed from behind. Turning together, my father and I encountered Richard, a contemporary of my father's from high school. Dressed in a suit and on an external sales trip, Richard hailed from a prestigious corporation. In the course of our conversation, Richard casually inquired if my father had indeed assumed control of the family business. This revelation prompted Richard to express disdain for what he referred to as the dirty little factory managed by my father, emphasizing the incredulity that a high school graduate could rise to the position of president. Stunned by Richard's derogatory remarks, I found myself grappling with the realization that the factory in question was initiated by my grandfather, making my father the second-generation custodian of this familial legacy. I had long been aware that he had assumed control after graduating from high school. However, the revelation of a classmate mocking him caught me off guard. Richard maintained a silent smile while addressing my father. "So, did you manage to expand your father's factory? You did mention during high school that you intended to take over the company and make it bigger." To this, my father admitted, "Unfortunately, I lacked the business acumen, and that dream didn't materialize. It seemed inevitable that I excelled in practical skills but lagged behind in intellectual pursuits. Nonetheless, I felt relieved that our family didn't face financial ruin." Richard chuckled heartily, playfully slapping my father on the shoulder. "Well, David, we'll catch up at the next reunion. I've got more work to do," he added before leaving. My father looked slightly uncomfortable, prompting me to redirect the conversation. Suggesting a change of topic, my father proposed that we continue shopping. At that moment, I couldn't shake the feeling that my father's work had been belittled without any response from me. The internal debate about whether to take over my father's company or pursue a career at a prestigious corporation leaned decisively toward the latter. A few weeks later, fate intervened as my father's alumni association event took place at the bar where I worked part-time. Despite the bustling atmosphere, I managed to serve at the table hosting my father's gathering. Fulfilling my duties silently, I approached the room where the Alumni Association was held. My father warmly greeted me, introducing me as his son to those present. Though similar in appearance, I maintained a serious demeanor, responding awkwardly to the teasing of my father's inebriated classmates. Richard, seated nearby, noticed our interaction and remarked, "We met recently too, David, right? Are you planning to take over your father's small factory?" This question added another layer to my ongoing contemplation of my professional path. When I truthfully admitted to still contemplating my decision, an unpleasant alcoholic breath emanated from Richard, leaving me repulsed. Boisterously, he exclaimed, "Stop it. Your father's company is nothing extraordinary. David should consider working for a company like mine instead of inheriting such a lackluster business." Despite his inebriated state, Richard proceeded to boast about his professional achievements, narrating a career history that began as a mere assistant but now claimed the head of accounting position. A sense of unease crept over me as I sensed discrepancies in his narrative. I sensed that something was amiss, but I chose to keep my concerns to myself, wary of potential complications that might arise from challenging him. My father, on the other hand, seemed unfazed by Richard's inebriation, and, in fact, found the situation amusing. With a lighter mood due to his own inebriation, he asked Richard about changes in his department since their last encounter a few weeks ago. Questioning the sudden shift from sales to accounting, my father caught Richard off guard. Eventually, Richard admitted to an abrupt transfer, asserting that sales wasn't his forte. However, my father pointed out the incongruity in Richard's story, revealing that the company Richard proudly spoke of had actually been absorbed by a foreign corporation, with its accounting department relocated overseas. Laughter erupted among the party attendees as Richard, now embarrassed and regretful, attempted to save face but ultimately decided to leave the gathering with heavy footsteps. Witnessing my father's ability to address the uncomfortable truth that others had noticed but hesitated to mention, I found a sense of pride in his candor, even in his intoxicated state. As half a year passed since that incident, my internal dilemma regarding whether or not to take over my father's company only intensified. The confusion deepened with each passing day, leaving me uncertain about the path I should pursue. One day, while relaxing at home, the intercom interrupted my contemplation. In the absence of my mother, I answered the door to find a visitor in uniformed clothes identifying themselves as a police officer. Surprised and apprehensive, I responded with a stiff voice, wondering if I had inadvertently committed some transgression. The police officer then brought up a purse-snatching incident, expressing a need to inquire about the matter with my father. The mention of such an incident left me puzzled, and I began to wonder about the unfolding events that seemed to add further layers of complexity to my already tumultuous life. Indeed, the enigmatic cloud of suspicion had descended upon my father, casting a shadow over our tranquil abode. The air thick with uncertainty, I found myself face to face with a stern-faced police officer bearing the weight of an accusation that seemed inconceivable. Inquiring about my father's whereabouts, the officer, with an air of professionalism, sought confirmation of his presence within our home. The exchange took an unexpected turn as the officer, grappling with the perplexity in my tone, requested to lay eyes upon my father. Navigating the corridors of my dwelling, I ushered the law enforcement representative into the sacred space of our familial sanctuary, a room adorned with a Buddhist altar and a photograph capturing the essence of my late father's spirit. In the ensuing revelation, I divulged the heartbreaking truth to the officer that my father had met an untimely demise in a tragic traffic accident. The officer, displaying empathy amid the unfolding tragedy, extended condolences for the loss. Yet my quest for justice and clarity persisted, and I sought to discern the source of this bewildering accusation that had stained my father's reputation. However, the officer, bound by the constraints of confidentiality, refrained from divulging the identity of the accuser. Apologies flowed from the lips of the officer as he departed, leaving me grappling with an unsettling sense of confusion and the nagging question of who had leveled such a grave accusation against my departed father. Days unfolded like the pages of a mystery novel, each chapter bringing a new layer of complexity to the narrative as I took on the responsibilities left in the void by my father's absence. Immersed in the daily operations of my father's factory, I witnessed my mother's valiant attempts to fill the void left by his absence. However, the weight of age limited her contributions. Amidst the mechanical symphony of the factory floor, the harmony was shattered by the sudden intrusion of Richard, a character bearing an air of accusation and vengeance. His booming voice reverberated through the cacophony, demanding restitution for a perceived transgression committed by my father. Caught in the crossfire of accusations, I attempted to reason with Richard, asserting my father's innocence in the face of the alleged purse-snatching incident. The atmosphere within the factory shifted, with the ceaseless hum of machinery giving way to hushed whispers and curious glances exchanged among the employees. Richard, however, remained resolute in his pursuit of justice, convinced of my father's guilt. His insistence echoed through the industrial expanse, causing a disturbance that transcended the confines of the factory. Frustration surged within me as I defended my father's honor, challenging Richard's assertions and questioning the veracity of his claims. As the confrontation unfolded, Richard revealed the purported timeline of the incident, fixing it 2 weeks prior. A murmur rippled through the gathered employees, their confusion palpable. My persistent queries regarding the accuracy of the timeline only fueled Richard's frustration, intensifying his vocal protestations. In the midst of the tumult, Richard's disparaging remarks about my father's workplace and colleagues added fuel to the emotional fire. Yet the gravest affront was his attempt to pin the blame for the alleged purse-snatching squarely on my deceased father's shoulders. My chest tightened with a mix of anger and sorrow as Richard persisted in his accusations, seemingly oblivious to the irrefutable truth, illuminating the fact that my father, the subject of this tumultuous ordeal, had met his end in a tragic traffic accident a month prior. The realization hung heavy in the air, a poignant reminder of the fragility of life and the injustice faced even in death. Richard appeared as though he had ingested an entire pigeonhole, and with an amused expression he muttered, "Ha!" Undeterred, I pressed on, questioning the incredulous accusation he had just hurled in my father's direction. How could my father snatch purses when he passed away just 1 month ago? Perhaps there wasn't any purse snatching at all, I asserted. However, my skepticism wasn't merely based on the recent events. It was rooted in the knowledge I had gained during our class reunion. It came to light that Richard, since his school days, had been a habitual liar. This revelation occurred during the reunion, where I discovered that his dishonesty had deep roots. Moreover, it turned out that Richard had harbored a long-standing jealousy toward my father, dating back to their school days. This envy sprouted from a romantic rivalry. The girl Richard liked had chosen my father over him. This petty jealousy had fueled an unnecessary rivalry, leaving me unable to forgive Richard for attempting to tarnish my deceased father's reputation with baseless accusations. As Richard persistently asserted his unfounded claims, an interjection from another direction pierced the air. Someone emphatically shouted, "Your president wouldn't do something like that." Our president is a serious person who walks around with honesty, teaching technology, and encouraging independence. He always considers the well-being of the staff and business partners, prioritizing that over profits. The voices praising my father began to multiply, and I felt a mix of emotions, including shame for once thinking my father's work was embarrassing. Amidst the rising tide of support for my father, Richard, trembling and tearful, found himself on the receiving end of an unexpected defense of my father's character by the factory workers. It was a poignant moment that revealed my father's true standing among his peers. In the aftermath, I dealt the decisive blow to Richard by pledging to consult with the police over his false accusations against my father. Overwhelmed and unable to counter the mounting evidence, Richard raised his voice and fled the factory. True to my word, I reported Richard's false accusations to the police, supported by a recording of his statements made by a thoughtful staff member during the heated confrontation. The presence of irrefutable evidence expedited the legal process, leading to Richard's swift apprehension. His attempt to frame my father backfired, transforming his lie into a crime for which he paid a penance in jail. The relief I felt was palpable, knowing that Richard had received the comeuppance he deserved. Days later, Richard's supposed wife sought redemption and arrived at our house with a gift box, apologizing to me and my mother. She confirmed that Richard's actions were a result of the wounds he suffered at the reunion. As it turned out, Richard, once an elite employee, had been fired from his company, struggling to secure new employment. His lies about being an elite crumbled under scrutiny, especially when his inebriated confessions exposed the inconsistencies, ultimately leading to his own embarrassment and downfall. As he grappled with mounting resentment towards my father, an insidious plan began to take root in Richard's mind, a sinister plot to frame him. The sheer audacity of Richard's intention left me utterly disgusted, particularly when I learned of his preposterous rationale for resorting to lies and deceit. Interestingly, it appeared that Richard's wife shared my sentiments. She confided in me, expressing her profound disappointment in Richard's actions and revealing her intention to initiate divorce proceedings. The revelation further underscored the gravity of Richard's transgressions. Adding to the complexity of the situation was the fact that Richard, seemingly devoid of any familial ties, had no children waiting for him upon potential release from jail. This realization cast a somber light on his future prospects. Upon my graduation from college, I found myself at a pivotal juncture. The recent passing of my father weighed heavily on my mind, and I harbored concerns about the state of the company he left behind. Motivated by a dual sense of responsibility and an unshakable desire to honor the legacy of those who had supported my father during Richard's malicious lies, I made the decision to step into the role of leading the company. The decision was multifaceted. Firstly, I felt a genuine concern for the effective management of the company in the wake of my father's demise. Secondly, the impassioned voices of the staff members who had steadfastly defended my father resonated within me. Their loyalty and dedication fueled my determination to become a president who would be both loved and respected by the staff. This incident became a transformative moment for me. Armed with a degree in business administration, I recognized my ability to manage the aspects of the company that my father struggled with. However, I also acknowledged my need to learn from the dedicated staff members who possessed valuable insights into the technological facets of the business. The staff members, driven by a collective sense of loyalty and compassion, willingly imparted their knowledge to me, often emphasizing that their efforts were for the sake of my father. Their anecdotes painted a vivid picture of my father's greatness, and with each story, I grew more appreciative of the man he was. Confronted with the realization of my father's true worth, I found myself expressing remorse for not having recognized his greatness while he was alive. Speaking to his portrait after work, I couldn't help but feel a sense of shame as I looked at my oil-stained self. Yet, I began to view those stains as tangible evidence of my father's tireless work ethic. Determined to honor my father's legacy, I pledged to become a president who mirrored his virtues. I was resolute in my commitment to make his dream of expanding the town factory, a legacy passed down since my grandfather's generation, a reality. Addressing his portrait once again, this time with newfound determination, I spoke of my aspirations and felt an ethereal connection, as if my father were smiling down upon me. From that moment forward, I dedicated myself to working tirelessly, aspiring to become a president worthy of my father's legacy and realizing his dream of expanding the family's factory that had endured through generations.